Okay, I'm going to get started by just welcoming everyone. Welcome. Nice to see all of you guys here. Welcome to anyone joining us online as well. Today is the second day of a 5-day course where I'm helping students to be able to understand the path to enlightenment through the teachings of the Buddha. Today, we're going to be starting with loving kindness meditation. Then I'm going to teach you the jhanas so that you can understand what these jhanas are, these preliminary phases that the mind goes through before it gets to the enlightened mental state. Then we're going to be talking about the 4 stages of enlightenment. And then ultimately this afternoon, we'll be discussing the 10 fetters and walking you through, helping you to understand what those are. So other classes, programs, courses, I teach loving kindness meditation, helping you to understand the ins and outs of it. Where here in this course, what I do is just kind of introduce it to you and then we just actually do it. So you guys will have an opportunity, if you haven't already, to learn loving kindness meditation and other programs. But now what I'm going to do is just kind of introduce it to you so that we can do it together. What we do with loving kindness meditation is just like the other meditations. We start with chanting in order to ease the mind into the meditation. Then you do a little bit of breathing mindfulness meditation. So you'll hear me guiding you for a brief period of time. Then there's going to just be like maybe 3 minutes or so where we're doing breathing mindfulness meditation. Then I'm going to come in with the loving kindness meditation where I'm going to be doing these affirmations where you're going to hear me saying these things out loud, like, may I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness and the suffering it causes. You do this on the out breath, and you'll see that we do it nice and slow. What you're doing here is you're essentially rewiring your mind to be more loving and kind. This isn't like asking some supreme power or supreme being to make you be more loving and kind. You're going to hear me go through different rings like may mom and dad be peaceful, safe, well, free of discontentedness. This isn't in order to change mom and dad. This is actually to change your mind, to transform your mind, because this path to enlightenment is about you doing the work to get to the point where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. And as long as you have anger, hatred, and ill will in your mind, frustration, agitation, annoyance, these are all feelings that are coming from your own mind. It's not other people that are causing these, and you can actually transform this. And this meditation is going to help you to be able to do that. As you guys learned yesterday, you need more than just meditation to be able to transform the mind. You can't just meditate your way to peace, right? You're going to need to use the meditation to build certain wholesome qualities in the mind and eliminate certain unwholesome qualities. But then you're going to need to go out into the world and practice being loving and kind through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. That's what's going to eradicate the pollution of the mind, where the mind has ill will and anger and hatred and resentment and bitterness and hostility. So this meditation, you're going to hear me doing these affirmations. This is essentially like filling up your gas tank with loving kindness so that now you can go out into the world and be more loving and kind in all your relationships. And as you're putting out more and more loving kindness, this is what's going to come back to you. Because if you look in your relationships where you're being bitter and harsh and hostile right now, perhaps you have certain relationships like that, you can see that there's bitterness and harshness and hostility coming back to you in those relationships. And you're not going to change those relationships by changing other people. That's oftentimes what people think, is they misunderstand what the real problem is they think the problem is external. They think mom and dad is making me angry, or brothers and sisters are frustrating me, or my boss is annoying me. This isn't actually true, as you guys learned yesterday, in a way that you can independently verify that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And this is why you can eliminate them. And part of that process is to do meditation, breathing mindfulness meditation, and then loving kindness meditation, so that now as you transform your mind, you can go out into the world and be loving and kind. So rather than to hold on to resentment and irritability and grumpiness and allowing that to come through in your speech and actions, instead, you can transform your mind with the meditation and now be loving and kind with the people around you. And that's what you're going to experience coming back to you. So after we do this portion where you hear me doing these affirmations, you will be repeating those in your mind. You'll hear me saying them out loud, but you repeat them in your own mind. Then we're going to go back to breathing mindfulness meditation for a little bit of time. Then we're going to come out of the meditation with chanting. Remember, the chanting isn't a rite or ritual or a ceremony or worship. It's not prayer or anything like that. It just helps us to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So if you'd like to take a position, either seated, lying, or standing, these are the 3 positions that work really well with loving kindness meditation. There is a walking position, but we don't usually use that for loving kindness meditation. It's only breathing mindfulness meditation. And as you guys know, the chants are over there on the cabinet in a laminated sheet. You guys are welcome to help yourself if you'd like to chant along. And as after that, then I'll come in with the guidance to be able to help you. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavitu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusranang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Then I'll be back with more guidance on loving kindness meditation. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Repeat these affirmations in the mind on the out breath. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May Mom and Dad be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May my family, friends, neighbors, and co-workers all be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who have caused me harm be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who I have harmed be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. Now return back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Potang Mahakawanang Apiwateyami Savakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang Namasami. สุปฏิปันโนมหะเขวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะหะเขวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโพโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone. Nice to see everyone here. Sawadee Krap. Welcome to everyone joining us online as well. As I was mentioning, this is loving kindness meditation. This is a meditation to transform your mind. Sometimes when people hear these affirmations, and if they're used to other types of traditions, they might think that you're trying to invoke some power somewhere to try to change yourself or other people. But that's not what you're doing here. This isn't a prayer or anything like that. What you're doing is you're rewiring your mind to be more loving and more kind. And this is an ideal practice for the morning. If you would like to do loving kindness in the morning, because then you go out in your day and you're more loving and kind with the people around you, because that's where the real transformation is happening in your day-to-day life, where your intentions, your speech, and your actions become more loving and more kind. And now you'll be able to interact in the world in a more loving and kind way with the people around you. And this is going to help improve your relationships, where you can get to a point where all your relationships are harmonious. Right now, if you have challenges or struggles in certain relationships, that's just because your mind has a lack of wisdom of how to interact in those relationships. You probably have craving, desire, attachment, where you're wanting mom and dad to be a certain way. You're wanting brothers and sisters or your life partner, your children to be a certain way. And when they do things your way, you get happy and you get excited. But then when they don't do things your way, you get angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. This is because the mind itself is having that longing, yearning, that want, the expectations, like we were talking about yesterday. So in addition to training your mind to let go with that breathing mindfulness meditation that we did yesterday, you also need to uproot any kind of anger or bitterness or hostility or resentment or agitation or annoyance and all of that stuff. You need to uproot that out of the mind, because otherwise it's going to come through in your speech and actions. And now you're going to be experiencing difficult situations when you're putting out bitterness and harshness and hostility. It's all just going to be coming back to you in your day-to-day life. Now, I know that, oftentimes we feel justified in your anger or your hostility. You might feel like this person deserves it, right? But that's where you learned yesterday, right view, that it's not other people that are causing your feelings. Your feelings are coming from your own mind, and you need to be able to see that very clearly through the Four Noble Truths. So the last thing you would be interested in is being bitter and harsh and hostile. But understand that this is gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, that you're not going to be able to just do this meditation once and then instantly go out in the world and be loving and kind with everybody around you, right? So you're going to need to gradually wear this away. The Buddha gives a great analogy when he talks about wearing away these fetters that we're going to be talking about today as part of today's class. He talks about this digging tool, that if you were digging with this tool and it had a wooden handle, each day you're wearing away wood from the handle as you're digging with this digging tool. And each day you're not going to know how much wood you're wearing away from the handle of this digging tool. But when the handle is completely exhausted and you need to replace it, you're going to know that. Right? So over the course of 3, 4, 5 years, you're gradually wearing away this wood on the handle of this digging tool, and you're not going to know how much wood you're wearing away each day. But when it's time to replace it, you're going to know that. And it's the same thing that is true about this anger and hostility and bitterness. If you're training your mind in the way that the Buddha teaches with all of his teachings, you're not going to know each day how much of the anger you're wearing away. But when it's completely gone, you're going to know that, because it'll be 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. You haven't been angry or bitter or harsh with anybody whatsoever. You'll see this kind of clearing up in certain relationships that you have. So this meditation is to help rewire your mind. And I did affirmations that are kind of more general and more broad that apply to all of us, but you would actually like to customize this for your specific needs. So like if you have someone named Bob, I don't know if there's any Bobs here, I apologize if anybody's name is Bob, but if you have a person named Bob in your life now or in the past that your mind is holding on to, and you're angry at this guy and you're frustrated and bitter and harsh, you're going to need to say, may Bob be peaceful. May Bob be safe. May Bob be well. May Bob be free of discontentedness and all the suffering it may cause, right? So you may or may not ever even see Bob. In fact, Bob might be dead, right? But if your mind is holding on to anger, it's not liberated. You still have that anger and resentments in there. You can't keep your anger kind of in a little box in the corner of your mind, and then somehow you're going to get to enlightenment. If you have any anger or frustration or resentment in your mind at all, you need to release it. So that's where breathing mindfulness meditation comes in, and then loving kindness meditation is going to help you to transform your mind. So even if you never see Bob another day in your life, getting rid of that anger and hostility is very important. So if you have ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, ex-bosses and coworkers and people like this that your mind's holding on to resentment and hostility for, you need to be able to let that go. Sometimes we think we're getting back at the other person by holding on to your grudge, by holding on to your resentment, but you're not. All you're doing is holding on to a hot coal and trying to burn somebody else with this hot coal. The only person getting burned is yourself. So that's why you like to release this out of the mind and get rid of it. So you're going to need to customize this. And you might actually kind of have different people in your meditation for a period of time, and then you kind of move them out. So when I grew up, I had a lot of resentment towards my mom. So for about 6 months, mom was in my loving kindness meditation, consistently meditating with mom in there. But eventually I got to the point where I was being loving and kind with mom all the time, and I could take her out of the meditation. But then maybe at that time I was in business, and maybe I'd have a customer or a coworker where there'd be some interaction and I would get angry or frustrated, and they would go into my meditation for like a week or 2 or 3, right? Or sometimes even I didn't even know the person. I'd be on my way to work. Someone would cut me off in traffic. I'd feel the anger coming up in the mind. I'd cut it off and let it go. But then for maybe 3 or 4 days, it would be, may that person who cut me off in traffic be peaceful, right? And when you start doing this regularly, you might actually start noticing that you actually start using this in your day-to-day life. So when you're driving down the road, instead of laying on the horn, it's like, all right, brother, may you be well, may you be peaceful. You can have the lane, go ahead, it's yours, right? Go for it, right? You learn to be loving and kind and just kind of let these things go. Now, you heard me share in this particular meditation where I said, may all those who have caused me harm be peaceful. It's important to understand the difference between harm and discontentedness. Other people can't cause you to be discontent. They can't cause you anger or frustration or agitation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of that is being caused by your craving, desire, attachment. But other people can cause you harm. Causing you harm is to cause harm to your material possessions, to the physical body, or to your reputation, for example. They can cause harm. But if you're becoming discontent in those situations, it's actually being caused by your own mind. So for example, if I stole somebody's car, I'm causing this person harm. right? Because I've affected their material possessions. They can't go to work so easily. They can't maybe go to the store and get basic necessities like food and clothing to sustain their life. And if they have children, they can't take their children to school. I've just caused this person harm by stealing their car, right? And now this harm is going to come back to me. But if they become angry or frustrated because their car is not there, that's their mind holding on and craving permanence, wanting this car to be permanent in their life. So this is one of the reasons why the Buddha teaches you not to steal, because of course it's coming from your own craving, but somebody else can become discontent, but you're not causing that discontentedness, right? So if somebody speaks to you in an unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful way, and you become angry, that person's not causing your anger. Your mind is craving for everybody in the world to speak to you in a certain way. And it's only when people speak to you in that way that you're happy. But when someone speaks to you in an impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful way, then the mind's frustrated or agitated or annoyed. This is the mind craving permanence, wanting things to be a certain way permanently, when in reality you live in an impermanent world. So it's important to understand the difference between harm and discontentedness. So if there's been people in your life that have caused you harm, it's very likely that your mind's holding on to anger and hostility. But that anger and hostility is coming from your own mind. It's not this other person. So if you were in a relationship with somebody and you guys broke up, and let's just say this person even maybe was unfaithful to you and they had sex with somebody else, they're not causing you to be angry or frustrated. It's your mind holding on to this person and wanting this relationship to be permanent. Now, surely they did something unwise, which was go outside the relationship and have sex with someone else. That's unwise, right? But they're going to experience the results of that. But your mind being angry or frustrated or agitated, it's your mind holding on. So in this situation, you would like to let this go, right? Ensure that you're not holding on to any bitterness or harshness and hostility. And that's what this meditation can do for you. So you can't meditate your way to peace and joy, but you're going to need this meditation to rewire your mind. So now as you rewire your mind in the morning, you go out in your day-to-day life through your intentions, your speech, and your actions, and you're more loving and more kind with the people around you. So one of the examples I typically give is that when I was growing up, when me and my mom were together, it was only a matter of time when we got together that there was fireworks that went off, right? Even in my 20s and even into my early 30s, there was so much bitterness and hostility on both of our sides that it was only a matter of time when we got together. There was going to be fireworks, right? And she would be angry and bitter and harsh, and I'd be angry and bitter and harsh. But when you start doing this meditation and you rewire your mind, now when people are being bitter and harsh and hostile to you, you can choose to do something different. You can choose to walk away, right? So when mom picks up the rubber ball of anger and she throws it around the room, if you pick up the rubber ball of anger and you throw it around the room and then she picks it up and throws it around the room, next thing you know, you got all these rubber balls of anger bouncing around in the room. But if somebody picks up a rubber ball of anger and they throw it around the room and you just watch it roll to the corner and lose its energy, you don't pick it up, there's no anger and hostility floating around the room, right? So you can just choose to walk away. And that's what these meditations are going to give you the ability to do. You can't just meditate your way to a more peaceful mind. You need to use the meditation to build the qualities of mind that you need. And then in your day-to-day life, that's where you practice the teachings, realizing that it's unwise to sit there and argue and scream and yell and be bitter and harsh and hostile with other people. It's not the proper time to talk when those kinds of things are happening. It's best to just walk away. All right. So I just thought I would kind of point that out with this particular meditation, because in other programs, I actually walk you through and I teach you this. I show you the words of the Buddha. I give you a whole bunch of background information on this. But here, I just thought I would kind of give you a little bit more information about it. Do you guys have any questions here about loving kindness meditation before we move on? Remember, if you guys could use the microphones here, and then for those of you guys online, if you could put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom electronically, you can unmute your microphone and ask any questions that you like. So do you guys have any questions on loving kindness? Yes, sir. If you could get a microphone, that'd be great. And it looks like Arvind has a question as well. So we'll come to you next, Arvind.
So when you were talking about a situation where, let's say, for example, somebody does something and we don't like it, and we practice loving kindness, and you talked about that person will will have to deal with the karma of whatever it is that they did. I think you touched upon before that we have to be careful, correct me if I'm wrong please, but we have to be careful not to say, oh, this person is going to suffer good karma or bad karma, but they will suffer or they will have to deal with some kind of karma, and we shouldn't necessarily label it good karma or bad. Say if they do something and we think, oh, that's really bad, I wish they hadn't done that, we shouldn't think of that person, oh, that person's going to get bad karma. Or if they do something nice, that person's going to get good karma. Could you talk to that, please?
Yeah, there's no part of this path where you're judging other people about what may or may not happen for them. It's all about your own inner work. So if somebody's done something, let's just use that example of a partner that's had sex outside the relationship. If that's occurred, that individual is going to experience the results of that, but it's not something that you need to like keep track of, or you need to look for, or you need to be obsessed about, or like, oh, they're going to get unwholesome karma because of that. Instead, just realize like, is this the kind of relationship that I would like to be in? Is this the kind of situation that I would like to be in? And you're going to need to make your decision about whether or not this is wise for you to continue in this relationship, because you can get sexually transmitted diseases. These other people that they're choosing to have sex with could come find you, beat you up, murder you because they're attached to this person. You could lose your material wealth. They could destroy your material property and possessions. And that's where you've got to decide, is this the kind of relationship that I would like to be in? Because there's a cause and effect relationship here, or a cause and effect aspect of this, because everything you experience is a result of your decisions. So if, let's just say, somebody lured a partner away from another person, like let's just say this person was married and now you lured this person away into a relationship with you. That's why the Buddha teaches you not to do that, because it's unwise. Because now that you've lured this person away, what do you think they're going to do with you? If they were willing to walk away from that relationship to have sex with you, they're going to be willing to do the same thing with you. So now this is the results of your decisions of having lured this person away. Now they're going off and doing that with someone else. And now if you continue to stay in those kinds of relationships and you continue to function that way, you're going to keep experiencing the same thing over and over, because you started the relationship in a unloyal way, an unfaithful way, that you're luring this person away from somebody else. So the Buddha is teaching you all these things so that you can make wise decisions and experience wholesome results, but you're not thinking about this other person of like, oh, they're going to get their karma and oh, they're going to get it. That's like your ill will coming up, right? That you're wanting this bad thing to happen, but you just know that it is going to occur and you just move on with your life if that's what you're choosing to do in that particular example. And then in some cases, somebody does this and maybe a couple sits down, they talk, they communicate. It was a one-time thing. It was a big mistake. The person regrets having done it. They're making amends to try to fix this and resolve it, because that's an option too, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship absolutely has to be over. And that's where the Buddha doesn't teach you like this plug and play. Like if this happens, do this. And if this happens, do that. Because that means there's a permanent answer for every situation. And there's not always a permanent answer. There's always multiple variables at play. And that's what it means to move to this higher consciousness, is to have wisdom to make the wise decision at any given time. So this is kind of helping you with that. Arvind had a question online, and then it looks like John has a question as well. Arvind, if you'd like to ask your question, go ahead, sir.
Hi, Teacher David. Hi, my question is with regards to loving kindness meditation. Now, I think after practicing it for a while, I've started noticing the interactions with others get better. Now, sometimes these interactions are with people I don't even know. And I just generally am seeing some change in the experience of these relationships with other beings, other people who I do not even have or had prior contact or communication with. How does that actually work? How does it actually work? Because I understand if it's with people I know or people that I am like not strangers with, because I may be reacting to them differently. But what if it's sometimes people or beings or that I have no prior contact with. How does that loving kindness actually work?
Yeah, this is the natural laws, right? When you're practicing good, wholesome moral conduct, like we taught yesterday in the Eightfold Path of right speech, right action, right livelihood, and then you're infusing all of that with loving kindness, which is what the Buddha is teaching you to do, then the natural law is that whatever you put out, it's going to come back to you. So even though you've never met this person at all, by you going out into the world and being more loving and more kind, that's what you're going to experience coming back to you. So this can happen with people that you're in existing relationships with, but also people that you've never met before as well, because people are being affected by this natural law. So for example, if you went to a hotel and you've never met the front desk person before, and you showed up to the front desk and you were like, I'm here to check in my room. Where's my room? Is it ready yet? Right? If you talked like this, you're going to get a different response. Whereas if you walked up and you said, hello, ma'am, how are you? How's your day going? I'm here to check in for my room. Is it possible to check in at this time? Right? You're going to get a completely different experience, even though you've never met this person whatsoever. So it's the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, that whatever you're putting out is going to come back to you. So when you're putting out love and kindness, through having transformed your mind with this meditation, now that's what you're going to experience coming back to you. And this is one of the reasons why it's so peaceful and so joyful in this enlightened mental state, because you've completely transformed your mind, and rather than being grumpy and irritable and bitter in all these different situations, you're being loving and kind to everybody around you. Even when you're checking into a hotel, with your taxi driver, with whatever it is, you're being loving and kind, and you're just noticing all this loving kindness coming back to you because of the natural law, that what you're putting out, it's coming back to you. Okay, so John, you have a question?
Good morning, Teacher David. I wanted to know about the connection, I think, between this kind of meditation and the breathing one. And I think in one of yesterday's slides, it was leading towards concentration. Mm-hmm. And is that maybe is that concentration the same understanding of concentration that is like the common understanding of concentration? Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. So concentration is where your mind's focused. You have clarity of mind, right? This is what you'll have when you have concentration. You'll have a deeper memory because your mind's not performing optimally, because you've uprooted these pollutions that we're going to talk about today, and your mind will perform more optimally. So what the breathing mindfulness meditation is that we did yesterday, that's helping you eliminate craving, desire, attachment. That what we talked about in the Four Noble Truths that's causing all that discontentedness. It's training your mind to let go. Let go, let go. Because with craving and clinging, the mind will hold on to things. If you can think back to that ex-boyfriend or girlfriend that you were with, where when you guys were together, everything was fine for a certain period of time. But then when you guys broke up, maybe you were angry or frustrated or lonely or bored, or you were missing this person for a period of time. And as you were experiencing that, it was very painful for you to be able to experience this time frame where you were lonely and bored and missing this person. But eventually at some point your mind let go, and you were like, you know what, if they would like to be with somebody else, so be it. Or if they would like to move to another part of the world, so be it. And your mind let go. And that's where you regained your peace and your joy. Well, what you would like to be able to do is train your mind to be able to let go. And then eventually you get to the point where you're never grabbing on, where you can have relationships, you can have very sustaining and satisfying relationships, but you're not holding on and craving permanence. You understand that people are going to come and go in and out of your life throughout your entire life. It's going to be happening that way forever. Even when you're enlightened, people are still going to be coming and going in and out of your life. So the breathing mindfulness meditation is training your mind to let go, because it doesn't know how to do that in the unenlightened state. Because of its unwholesome quality of craving and clinging, it's going to keep holding on. So that's the unwholesome quality you're eliminating with breathing mindfulness meditation. And you're developing the wholesome qualities of mindfulness or awareness of mind and concentration, being able to focus and have concentration. With the loving kindness meditation, you're training your mind to eliminate the anger, hatred, and ill will. And you're then cultivating loving kindness, or this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Yesterday afternoon, we skipped the 3 poisons and the 3 unwholesome roots and the 3 fires discussion, because we were spending time focused on the Eightfold Path. But what you would have heard there is that these are what's called the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots. in more detail, the Buddha describes these pollutions as the 10 fetters, and that's what you're going to hear about today. But at a high level, we talk about it as craving, anger, and ignorance. What craving is where the mind is longing, yearning. It's wanting things to be a certain way. It's expecting things to be a certain way. And if it gets what it wants, it experiences happiness or excitement. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. And then when that anger is arising because of the craving, when the anger is arising, the unenlightened mind will attribute it to something external, and that's where the mind will push people away. This is called aversion. You might push people away out of your life, or you might push a situation out of your life thinking that that's going to solve the problem, but it really doesn't, because the problem is inside your own mind. That's why you still get angry and frustrated. Or you'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile through your intentions, speech, and actions. Or you'll put your expectations on people and try to control people and force them to do things your way. And where this is coming from is what's called ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. I don't usually use this word ignorance, but other teachers use it, so I use it to be able to help you understand. But it's better to think about it as confusion or misunderstanding or lack of wisdom, misperception, misunderstanding of true reality, that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand in the unenlightened state. It lacks wisdom to realize that this anger is actually being caused by your own mind. It firmly believes the problem is external. It firmly believes other people are causing you to be angry, when in reality it's your own mind. So we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, and you're working to eliminate the cravings through breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity, training your mind to let go, right? That's what generosity does. When you're giving and sharing with others, you're training your mind to let go, because the mind will be very selfish. So that's what the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity is doing. The loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in your day-to-day life through your intention, speech, and actions, that's transforming the anger, getting that out of your mind. And then the way you transform the ignorance is to cultivate wisdom. That's why I teach you at the very beginning of all the programs that I teach, don't believe anything I say. Don't ever believe me, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it. But if you can learn something, examine it and investigate it, if you can reflect on it to independently verify it, and then you can practice it to integrate it into your life, then you'll have wisdom and you'll know the truth. So that's what's going to transform the wisdom, or transform the ignorance into wisdom. So while we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, and there's antidotes to these, which are generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, it's really because of ignorance that craving and anger continues to exist. If it wasn't for the lack of wisdom, craving and anger would have already been eliminated from the mind. So this craving, anger, and ignorance is plaguing the mind and keeping it in this unenlightened state where you keep experiencing frustration and agitation and annoyance over and over. See, people oftentimes think that when you hate somebody else or when you dislike somebody else, they think it's coming from the other person, when in reality it's coming from your own mind. The mind has certain expectations that it wants people to be a certain way. And when people meet your expectations, you like them. And when they don't meet your expectations, you dislike them, right? So this is actually coming from one's own mind, because the mind's wanting everybody to be a certain way. They're wanting this permanence. The mind wants this permanence. And when the mind's not getting it, it's like, I don't like that person. I dislike this person, right? So you can get to the point where you just love everybody and you understand impermanence, that some people are going to be here on time. Some people are going to come late, right? That's okay. Hey, Joe. Some people are going to walk into class when you're already talking, and that's okay. You can still love them, right? It's just impermanence, right? That's all it is. But if you have an expectation of you want everybody to do it a certain way, then you'll be frustrated and agitated or annoyed when things aren't happening your way. And now you might dislike this person or hate this person. So this loving kindness meditation is going to help you to uproot that deeply rooted anger and hatred in the mind. But all the while, you're working with breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity to let go of these cravings and longing, yearning, and expectations and wants. And now this wisdom gets cultivated more and more to transform all of this. You have a question? Oh, you're just scratching your head? Yeah, if you could get a microphone. Yeah, we have people online that'll be pleased to hear what your questions are. Just takes a second to engage.
my question is more of a technicality on how to practice it. Is there like a time limit? Do you ever repeat the same ones over and over again, or do you just do it until you can't think of any more people?
Yeah, so from when you start chanting to you end chanting, that can be 30 minutes. That's ideal for you. So you do like, maybe like 3 to 5 minutes of breathing mindfulness meditation on both sides. And then the middle part's usually about 12 to 15 minutes. You would like to do about 6 to 8 rings. Your mind can't really manage anything more than that. 6 is kind of ideal. You can go up to as many as 8. That's fine. You can repeat them. So like when I started doing this initially, I had a lot of negative self-talk within my own mind, like this inner dialogue where I was degrading and diminishing myself. This will transform that. If you have that in your mind, this will transform that. So I used to do myself like 2 or 3 times. May I be peaceful, safe, well, free of may I be peaceful, safe. I did that like 2 or 3 times. Then I had a lot of resentment towards my mom. So I would do her 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And then that was it. I would go to all beings. You would like to end with all beings each time so that there's nobody you've left out. So I'd do myself like 2 or 3 times, mom maybe 2 or 3 times, and then all beings. And I did that for like 6 months because I just went for the real problematic ones. And then when I started transforming my mind, then I started to bring in some other people that I had some things that I needed to deal with and sort out. So you can structure this however you like, but you would like to use these same phrases and start with I, end with all beings, and then in the middle, usually you start with like a ring or 2 of people you already have loving kindness for. So that's why I start with mom and dad. Typically people have some of that. Then you go to people that you're more neutral about, like co-workers, neighbors, people like that. You're kind of bubbling up and kind of overflowing the loving kindness. And then you kind of finish it up with some people that you do have anger with, but you've bubbled up the loving kindness by that point, and it kind of overflows into that group. And now your mind will be more loving and kind towards them. You have more?
Yeah, just in terms of starting off, and if you don't know the chanting.
The chanting isn't required in order to do meditation. It's something that you can do. I teach it in the foundational programs, which I teach every month, the first full week of every month. And there's also a program that I teach it where I teach Sunday and Wednesday, just like an hour and a half each day, Sunday and Wednesday, Sunday and Wednesday. And like I was mentioning to you, it's recorded as well. So if you can't make it live, you can attend through the recording. But I teach it in there. So you can chant and it will help you to get more benefit out of the meditation. But nowadays, it's not required to chant in order to experience enlightenment. Where during the lifetime of the Buddha, chanting was needed in order to commit the teachings to memory. That's what it was for. It was a learning device, where nowadays we don't need it in order to learn the teachings because we have books and audiobooks and videos and podcasts and things like that. Any other questions? Okay. Let me check here online. Welcome to everyone online. All right. Let me just check YouTube. I don't see any on YouTube. And let me just check Facebook. Okay, I don't see any questions. Okay, so let's move into today's topic for this morning. I'm going to be teaching you this topic of understanding and experiencing the jhanas. The light bulb is flickering. This is where you're starting to experience enhanced qualities of mind. When you put together the Eightfold Path really well and you dial this into your life for an extended period of time, you're going to start experiencing certain qualities of mind that we refer to as the jhanas. Okay, if this translated to just one English word, I would use it, but this is the only other Pali word that I still need to use. There's only 2 words in Pali that I still need to use, which is Kama and Jhana. Everything else I teach in English because it's just easier for everyone. But this particular word doesn't translate to just one English word. But what this is preliminary phases that your mind's going through as you're getting ready to experience the first stage of enlightenment. And I refer to it as the light bulb is flickering because what you're experiencing during this period of time is you're experiencing these glimpses of what enlightenment can be like. It's not at the same level as what enlightenment is like, but you're getting these little glimpses. It's kind of like if you had the sun and there was clouds in front of the sun and you started peeling back the clouds, the rays of the sun are going to start shining through little by little. And it's the same thing as when you're starting to peel back this pollution of the mind using the Eightfold Path and training your mind with that, you're going to start noticing these little qualities starting to shine through. And the Buddha is going to teach you what those qualities are. And it's helpful to know what these qualities are, because once you start experiencing the jhanas, your practice kind of pivots a bit. You're no longer focused on the Eightfold Path so much because you know you've got that well under practice. You still need to pay attention to it and make sure that you're practicing it well, but you start pivoting and you start focusing on the 10 fetters more closely at this point once you start experiencing the jhanas. So it's important to understand what the jhanas are so that you'll know that you're experiencing the jhanas and it's time to start pivoting your practice and start focusing on the 10 fetters directly. So I'm going to help you guys to understand this topic. And just like always, you're welcome to ask questions with the microphones here, or those of you guys online, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So first, let's just talk about what the jhanas are. So this word jhana, it's a Pali word that stands for meditative or mental absorption. Essentially, the mind has absorbed a certain amount of the teachings, and you've absorbed a certain amount of meditation at that point, and now you're starting to experience enhanced qualities of mind. That's what the jhanas are. So they refer to these deep states of subtle concentration, because your mind, in addition to other qualities, you're going to experience this deep concentration as your mind's moving through the jhanas. The mind's going to be relaxed and calm, but yet alert and attentive. And this is why I refer to it as the light bulb is flickering, because you're getting glimpses for temporary periods of time of some of the qualities of enlightenment. Maybe for a few minutes, maybe for an hour or two, you can start like, wow, the mind is just so peaceful. But because you still have pollution in your mind, you're going to experience some frustration or agitation. It's only a matter of time because the mind's not yet enlightened. But the difference between being off the path to enlightenment and experiencing these jhanas, it's almost like night and day. It's very noticeable when you understand what you're experiencing. So as I was mentioning, these are 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through as you're making your way to the first stage of enlightenment. And this is occurring because an individual has put together the Eightfold Path very well. By dialing in that Eightfold Path that we talked about yesterday, you'll start experiencing the jhanas eventually. And this can take a different amount of time for every person because different people come to the path with different levels of pollution. So it's not like everybody's going to experience this when they get to the 1-year mark or the 6-month mark or something like that. It's more that each person has different levels of pollution. Everybody has a different level of dedication and commitment to training their mind. So there's not kind of like a one template of how long it's going to take before you get to the jhanas. But they are preliminary phases that your mind's going to go through as you're making your way to the first stage of enlightenment. And this is coming from the Eightfold Path. But remember, the 5 precepts plug into the Eightfold Path. So you're going to need to learn the 5 precepts. You're not going to be able to get to the jhanas without having learned the 5 precepts. You're not going to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment without practicing the 5 precepts. And you need to use the original words of the Buddha for this. So that's why in this book, the first book, volume 1, chapter 7, that's where you're going to find the 5 precepts. And I teach these in the other foundational programs, but you need to be able to learn the ins and outs of the 5 precepts because that plugs into the Eightfold Path and it's going to better inform you of how to practice the Eightfold Path. Okay, so you're going to see different numbers of jhanas that people talk about. You'll hear people talk about 8 jhanas or 12 jhanas or however many number of jhanas that people talk about. This isn't what the Buddha taught. He taught 4 jhanas, and I'm going to show you his words. But nowadays, 2,500 years after his death, people have changed his teachings, either inadvertently or overtly. They've changed his teachings. But by you studying with the original words of the Buddha, you'll know exactly what he taught and what he didn't teach. So you're going to see that he taught 4 jhanas. So no matter what anybody else says, you'll know what the Buddha actually taught. So these are an indication that you're putting together the Eightfold Path really well. And now, as you're starting to experience those enhanced qualities, it's time to shift and start focusing on the 10 fetters, which I'm going to be teaching you throughout the rest of today as well. So this is that light bulb flickering. On your way to the first stage of enlightenment, every single practitioner will experience the jhanas. If you stick with this path long enough and you're making your way to the first stage of enlightenment, everybody will experience the jhanas, because these are enhanced qualities that you actually need in order to actually be able to get to enlightenment itself. You wouldn't be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment without first experiencing the jhanas. So you will experience these on your way to the first stage of enlightenment. In terms of more of what the jhanas are, is the jhanas are temporary. They're not meant for the mind to dwell in these particular phases. So sometimes the qualities of the jhanas are so significant for people, they get really bogged down in the jhanas. And they think that that's kind of, some people think that it's actually enlightenment, because it's such a difference from when you were off the path to enlightenment to when you're experiencing these jhanas. Some people are in the jhanas and they think that they're actually enlightened because there's such heightened qualities that you're experiencing there. And this is where you might hear somebody tell you that an enlightened being still gets angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. What's happening is that individual might be experiencing the jhanas. They still experience anger and frustration, but because they're experiencing those heightened qualities, they think that they're enlightened, and they're describing enlightened beings as still getting sad or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. But in reality, they're probably just experiencing the jhanas. That's all it is, right? So these jhanas are not meant to dwell there, and somebody can kind of cling to those qualities and their practice kind of bottoms out. It kind of plateaus, and that's not what you're interested in. So as you start experiencing these heightened qualities of mind, remember there's a whole lot more growth for you. Essentially, once you get to the jhanas, that's where the real work really begins, because now your mind's fully prepared to be able to continue to go on from there. So if you got bogged down in the jhanas and your mind became complacent, your mind can actually regress backwards. So the jhanas, they're not permanent. The mind can actually regress backwards. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind won't regress backwards from there. There will only be forward progress. But when you're in the jhanas, your mind can still regress backwards. So that's why it's so important not to become complacent and not be so enthused with these heightened qualities that you're going to be experiencing, because if you become complacent, your mind will regress backwards out of the jhanas. So these are improved qualities of mind that you're experiencing at all times of your day. These qualities will be permeating in the mind as you're making your way towards the 4 stages of enlightenment. Even when you're in the first, second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment, you're still experiencing the same qualities of the jhanas. There's big misunderstanding around these jhanas, and that's why I share this, is because some people think you're only experiencing the jhanas when you're in meditation. And this isn't actually true. And you'll be able to see that with the words of the Buddha. And then, as I shared, that these jhanas are oftentimes mistaken for enlightenment because of the improved qualities of mind that one is experiencing. But this is just coming from a lack of wisdom about what enlightenment is, where somebody can misunderstand what enlightenment is and they can think that they're actually enlightened, but they're still getting angry, they're still getting frustrated, they're still getting annoyed. And if they're experiencing that, they're not yet enlightened. So you'll meet people that might talk about these kinds of things. But as soon as somebody tells you that they're enlightened, that's how you know that they're not enlightened, because an enlightened being doesn't go around bragging. They don't go around being boastful that they're enlightened. So if somebody rolls up to you like, hey, by the way, guess what? I'm enlightened. You know that they're not, right? Because an enlightened being doesn't go around boasting. They're not arrogant and prideful. Their ego would have been eliminated. They're not going to go around and brag about getting to enlightenment. So as soon as somebody says those kinds of things, you know that they're not enlightened. And if you ask those people, if you're like, hey, do you still experience anger or frustration? They're going to say yes, that they do, if they're being honest, because their mind is not yet enlightened. Okay, so in terms of what the jhanas are not, this is one of the ways that I teach, is I like to teach what something is, but I also like to teach what something is not as well, because that'll help you to understand what something is. What the jhanas are not is they're not something to be boastful about or claiming that you have attained a certain jhana, right? So you're not going to put this on your Facebook profile. like that you're in the first jhana or the second jhana, right? Or you're not going to call up your mom and be like, hey mom, guess what? I'm in the third jhana. Aren't you so proud of me? Right? That's not what these jhanas are about. It's essentially like a growth plan that you can kind of see for your own personal development where you're at in this journey so that you know where to focus next. You might talk about these with your teacher. You might be like, hey, I think I'm in the third jhana, or I think I'm in the fourth jhana. And now I can help you to be able to discern that, to figure out whether you're actually in that jhana, but you're not going to go out, talking on the street about these kinds of things, right? As I mentioned, the jhanas are not only experienced in meditation, and it's not only meditation that will produce these mental qualities. If you were only meditating, you wouldn't be able to experience the jhanas because you're not putting together the moral conduct, for example. Even though you can't do this, let's just say you were meditating 23 hours a day, but you went outside for an hour a day and you were bitter and harsh and hostile with people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. You're not anywhere close to the jhanas, being bitter and harsh and hostile with people like that, right? So there's more than just meditation. It's also your moral conduct of going out into the world. That's what's going to help you to be able to make your way to the jhanas and beyond. So there's more than just meditation that you need in order to be able to get to the jhanas. And you're going to be experiencing these qualities in meditation, but also outside of meditation too. And like I mentioned, you'll be able to see the words of the Buddha on that. The jhanas aren't something to crave or be obsessed about what jhana you're in and what jhana you're headed to. I've seen people do this. They're trying to figure out, like, am I in the second jhana or the third jhana? They're so obsessed about it and trying to figure out every last little detail. You'll get bogged down if you do that. The things that got you into the jhanas are the Eightfold Path. Practicing the Eightfold Path is what got you into the jhanas, and what's going to get you moving beyond that is to start focusing on the 10 fetters. So rather than getting bogged down and trying to figure out exactly what jhana you're in at any given time or what jhana you're headed to, just stay focused on developing your mind with the Eightfold Path and eliminating the 10 fetters, and you will move through the jhanas. You don't have to worry about that. It will happen. You just need to keep working on eliminating the pollution of the mind. So staying focused on the 10 fetters is what's going to help you move beyond this rather than getting bogged down, which will hinder the progress forward. So the jhanas are not enlightenment. The mind's still experiencing discontentedness when you're in the jhanas. By the time you get to the fourth stage of enlightenment, you won't have any discontentedness whatsoever. There's going to be no anger, no frustration, no shyness, bitterness, no stress, no anxiety. And it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years that you're going to see this in the mind, that the mind's completely peaceful and joyful every single moment of the day. There's not even the slightest little ickiness in the mind by the time you get to enlightenment. That's not the case with the jhanas. With the jhanas, you're still going to be experiencing some discontentedness. It's reduced from where you were before, but you're still experiencing discontentedness. Okay. It's also, these jhanas aren't something mystical or magical to experience, and it doesn't determine that you're a special person or that you are special, right? That's not what this determines. As soon as you start thinking that way, that's your conceit coming in, and you would like to get rid of that conceit, right? So don't think of it as anything mystical or magical, and don't think of it as you're a special person, because anybody who chooses to focus on the Eightfold Path and they train close enough, they will all experience the jhanas. It's not just a special person that's going to experience this. And the same thing is true with enlightenment. Once your mind gets to enlightenment, you shouldn't think of yourself as, I am a special person now because I am enlightened. If you think that way, you're actually not enlightened because you still have ego. You still have conceit. So you shouldn't think about it as you're a special person just because you're experiencing these jhanas. Now I'm going to share some dangers about these jhanas, because there are certain things that you need to be aware of as your mind is moving into these jhanas. Okay, so due to this drastically improved qualities of mind, the mind can become conceited, boastful, and arrogant and prideful. I've seen this many times. People start experiencing the jhanas and their mind starts to become conceited and arrogant and boastful because they're starting to get this clarity of mind that they never had before. I've even seen people get really conceited towards the teacher who's been helping them to actually train their mind and get to this clarity. All of a sudden they think that they're above the teacher. Their mind's so much more clear than the teacher. But the teacher is the one who helped you to be able to get to that mental state. How could the teacher not be experiencing the same things you're experiencing, right? So sometimes when students get into the jhanas, I've seen them become very conceited and boastful and arrogant. So don't allow this to happen to you. When you start experiencing those heightened qualities, be appreciative that your mind is experiencing those, but don't allow your mind to become conceited and arrogant and boastful. Stay humble. This is really important. The mind can become complacent when you're starting to experience these improved qualities. It's like, this feels so good. It's kind of like sitting on a really soft couch and you don't want to get up off that couch. It's like, this is great. I could sit here forever, right? It's the same kind of thing as when your mind's starting to experience those heightened qualities of the jhanas. It's like, I want to hang out here. This is great. But there's something even better than what you're experiencing in the jhanas that are beyond the jhanas. But you'll never get beyond the jhanas if you stay bogged down in the jhanas. So if you allow your mind to become complacent when you're in the jhanas, it's just going to regress backwards. So you're not interested in getting bogged down in the jhanas. So if you notice complacency coming into the mind where there's dullness, lethargic, a lack of willingness to do something, a lack of initiative, a lack of vigor or vitality, you're going to need to arise energy in the mind by applying right effort to bring that energy in the mind so you can continue to make forward progress on the path. As I mentioned, with complacency, the mind will regress out of the jhanas. I've had the people contact me many times. They'll say, 10 years ago, I used to do all this meditation. I used to do all these things. I used to have all this concentration and peacefulness was starting to come into my mind. And wow, it was amazing. And I experienced that for about 3 or 4 weeks. But then I stopped meditating and I stopped learning and growing on this path. And I never experienced those qualities ever again. Can you help me understand what that was? That was the jhanas. For about 2, 3, 4 weeks, they were experiencing the jhanas. Their mind became complacent and they slacked off of their meditation and then their mind regressed, right? So these are the kind of things that can happen if you become complacent. There can be this overwhelming excitement and joy that's in the mind, and it can become a real challenge to restrain the mind during this period of time because you're still experiencing conditioned feelings during this period of time. There can be this overwhelming excitement and joy that is coming into the mind, and it can be so overwhelming that your mind is kind of lurching forward, and it's hard to restrain the mind. So you need to be aware of that because your mind is not fully disciplined yet. You're not going to be able to fully control the mind. So this is a period of time where you need to work on that. Sometimes it can almost be like that toy that they have where there's like these snakes that are springy and you kind of turn this little lever and then it springs out and the snakes are like, and they're like bouncing all over the place. Your mind can kind of be like that a little bit when you're in the jhanas. So you need to learn how to restrain your mind and pull it back. There can be these mood swings from gladness to sadness, right? The mind is kind of like a pendulum that when you're chasing with craving, desire, attachment, and you're holding on to things, as you're starting to let that stuff go, your mind can kind of swing to the other side. You think it might just come to the middle, but it doesn't. It overshoots the middle and it goes to the other side. So you can be chasing, craving, desire, attachment, getting all this gladness in the mind. But then when you start letting that go, the mind can kind of swing to the other side. And now there can be this dullness or this lethargic condition or this sadness or boredom or loneliness that is in the mind. So you might notice the mind kind of swinging like a pendulum. And that's the mind trying to find the middle. It's not going to be all the way over here on this side and just come straight to the middle. It's going to overshoot the middle. And then when you're over here and you realize, that's not peaceful either, then you kind of come back this way, but you overshoot the middle again and you go over here. Instead of going here, you go right here. And now you're like, that's not the middle. And then you kind of start bringing it this way and you come over here and and then finally you find the middle, right? That's what your mind's going to ultimately end up experiencing. So during these swings that you're experiencing, it can be kind of shaking you up a little bit. You can notice sometimes a difficulty sleeping when you're having these kinds of situations occurring and some other things as well. So there can be these significant amounts of energy. There can be like these surges where you feel this kind of energy surge within the mind during these periods of time. And what you would like to do is bring in the tranquility, the concentration, and equanimity to be able to calm the mind down during those periods of time. Okay, now let's talk about the benefits of the jhanas. The benefits are that this is an indication for you that you're putting together the Eightfold Path and you're headed in the right direction. This is like the first big, huge, significant indication, like, oh my goodness, this stuff is working. This guy taught these teachings 2,500 years ago. I did what he talked about. I trained my mind with the Eightfold Path, and oh my goodness, look at this. The enhanced qualities are coming in. You'll experience improvement prior to the jhanas, and you'll know you're headed in the right direction. But when you're getting to the jhanas, it's like a really big step that you're really noticing that your mind's improving. And this is a good indication for you. And it can be very impactful because you're going to see the words of the Buddha about him describing the jhanas. And when you realize he taught this 2,500 years ago, and here you are experiencing exactly the things that he's talking about, it can be pretty eye-opening at that point. Okay, there's these improved qualities of mind that are needed for further progress on the path to enlightenment. You're going to see these enhanced qualities of mind that the Buddha is talking about, and that's what you actually need in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. For example, this one right here, that by the time you get to the second jhana, you're going to experience what's called oneness of mind or unification of mind. Prior to the second jhana, you have a conscious mind and you have a subconscious mind. Both of these are polluted. The subconscious mind is actually more polluted than the conscious mind. If you've ever been around friends before and you just kind of blurted something out and you're like, why did I say that? I don't think like that. Like, that's strange. Like, maybe you said something racist or off color, so to speak, and you were like, that's not me. That's not the way I think. Like, why did I say that? That was so silly. That's your subconscious mind throwing things up into your conscious mind, and your conscious mind didn't think about it and you just blurted it out, right? That's the challenge with when you have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind, that this heavily polluted subconscious mind is going to throw things up into your conscious mind and you're just going to blurt it out and creating unwholesome results for yourself. But by the time you get to the second jhana, you're experiencing what's called unification of the mind or oneness of mind, where you no longer have a conscious and subconscious mind anymore. You can observe the entire mind. Your mind now has the ability to have awareness of your entire mind. And this is what you need in order to make your way to enlightenment, because you're going to need to purify your entire mind. If there was a conscious mind and a subconscious mind, the subconscious mind meaning you're not aware of it, you wouldn't actually be able to get to enlightenment because you wouldn't have any insight into your subconscious mind. So that's why by the time you get to this second jhana, you've had this full awareness of the mind where there's no longer a subconscious mind, so you can fully purify the mind. And this is where some people, when they're practicing and they're getting into that second jhana and they start seeing all the dirt, all the baggage that's in their mind, they're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea all this stuff was in there. It's kind of like the lid has come off and now you look down into this cesspit and it's like, oh my goodness, I had no idea this mind was so dirty like this, and it was got so much pollution. So this is actually one of the benefits, is you're getting these enhanced qualities that are going to actually help you to make your way to enlightenment. You wouldn't actually be able to fully purify your mind if you didn't have full awareness of your mind, if you didn't have oneness of mind or unification of the mind. So that's one of the benefits of the jhanas, is that you're now going to have full awareness of the mind. And this is why these are qualities that you're going to be experiencing all day long. It's not just during meditation that you're experiencing the jhanas. During the time that your mind is in the jhanas, you'll be cultivating this deep wisdom that leads to continuous growth and development on the path to enlightenment. Some people refer to this as the opening of the third eye, or the divine eye, or the inner eye, or the inward looking eye, because the mind becomes very introspective during this period of time, that you cultivate a lot of wisdom. You're going to see the words of the Buddha where he talks about thinking and pondering. During the period of time that your mind's moving into the jhanas, you're going to do a lot of thinking and pondering about your life, about the teachings, about the decisions that you were making, where in the past you might have had an idea or a certain craving and you just reacted to it, and you just ran out there and you tried to buy that thing or get that thing. Where now you kind of start taking your time a little bit more in the jhanas. You start thinking about your decisions. You start paying careful attention to what it is that you're deciding to do in the world, because you're starting to understand the natural law of karma, and you understand any decisions you make are going to have some result to it. There's going to be a cause and effect. And you start noticing this about your life, and you start slowing down your decision making and taking your time, making very intentional and careful decisions while you're in the jhanas. And you start thinking over the teachings of the Buddha and what it is that you're facing. Where in the past you might have faced a certain situation and you just reacted to it, right? Where now you're facing a certain situation, you step back, you think about it, you decide what would be the best approach. You think and ponder about the teachings of the Buddha, then you implement a decision. So when you're in the jhanas, your thinking is going to slow down a bit, because you're going to start thinking about these teachings and the best way to make a wise decision here. And during this period of time, you'll be cultivating a lot of wisdom. And now that wisdom will become more on board in the mind. And now over time, you'll be able to make decisions more readily because you have more wisdom on board. But during this period of time in the jhanas, there's a lot of thinking and pondering and cultivation of wisdom, introspection, where you're looking inward, where you weren't necessarily doing that before. As I mentioned, this is a period of time where you're cultivating a lot of wisdom, and that wisdom is going to help you to understand wholesome and unwholesome, as well as wise and unwise decision making, where oftentimes we go through the world having grown up as a child where we don't necessarily know what's wise or unwise, or what's wholesome or unwholesome, because we didn't cultivate that wisdom necessarily. But having cultivated that wisdom through the jhanas, you'll have more and more wisdom on board, and now you might start noticing that you're making different decisions about where you work, about who to involve in your life, about where you're going to live, about what types of foods you're eating, and these kinds of things. You're going to start paying a lot more attention to your decision making, and you'll know what is wise and unwise, or wholesome and unwholesome. So these are some of the benefits of the jhanas. Some more benefits is that discontentedness is significantly reduced during this period of time. That when your mind moves into the jhanas, you're going to notice this reduction of discontentedness. It's still not enlightened yet. The mind's still not enlightened, but there's this significant reduction. You're going to notice this calmness and composure in the mind, this equanimity in the mind. It's more readily accessible and easily practiced. Where in the past, maybe you got a phone call that your mom was in a terrible car accident and she's being rushed to the hospital in the back of an ambulance. And you might have been all shaken up by that. Grab your keys and jump in the car and run across the town in order to get to the hospital. Where now in the jhanas, your mind's going to start processing the world a bit different. You're going to have more calmness and composure in your mind. Mom's been in an accident. That's unfortunate. Let me get my keys and make my way to the hospital. But you're going to make sure that your mind is nice and calm, because you know when you arrive, you're going to need to talk to the doctors and the nurses, find out what's going on, and start making some decisions that help mom. It doesn't help mom to show up to the hospital with your mind all unstable and all unsteady and all shaken up. But when you have an attachment to your mom and you're holding on and you're clinging, wanting mom to be permanently healthy, now when you realize that she's not healthy anymore, your mind's not getting what it wants, and you can easily be shaken up during this time. But when your mind's in the jhanas, you started to let go of some of that holding on and craving permanence, and you'll be able to maintain your calmness and composure in more and more situations. The Buddha refers to this as equanimity, where the mind can be calm and composed even in difficult situations. You'll notice that you'll have more awareness of this interconnectivity of nature, of all beings in the world. So you might notice a deeper connection to animals or even insects. It's like, oh, you little mosquito, why don't you go away, right? Don't bite me. I don't taste that good. Go away. I wouldn't be such a good meal. Go away, right? Instead of like, just kind of killing the mosquito, right? You start having more interconnectivity with the beings around you because you're starting to relate to beings in a more loving and kind way. So you can feel closer to all beings while being able to see their suffering and their harm. Like you'll see your family members and your friends that are in deep suffering and complaining about everything and anything under the sun, while you're actually quite joyful for certain periods of time during your day while you're in the jhanas. So you'll be able to see other people suffering very clearly while you're in the jhanas. You'll notice that smiling becomes easier for you in the jhanas because you have a more cheerful disposition. I started experiencing pain in my face. I started smiling so much because I wasn't used to using those muscles, because I didn't really smile very much because I was discontent all the time. But when I started smiling a lot, I started having this pain in my face from the muscles that I wasn't using in the past. So you might even notice these kinds of things occurring. You might notice that it's easier to communicate and interact in the world with the people around you. You'll notice that it's easier to develop relationships with wholesome friends, that you'll notice that you're making wiser decisions about who to involve in your life on a day-to-day basis. You'll notice that you have more wisdom about how to practice wholesome intention, speech, and actions. And that's why you're able to cultivate better relationships, because you're functioning better. Kind of like what Arvind was just talking about. He was talking about how he's relating to people that he doesn't even know in a better way, right? This comes from the wisdom of how to interact in the world in wise ways as you're starting to develop your practice, right? All right. So any questions on any of this stuff that I just shared, what the jhanas are, what they are not, the dangers of jhanas, the benefits of jhanas?
I have a question about when you're dreaming, when you're asleep, would you see also changes? Because sometimes I have nightmares and I've suffering during my sleep, and then when I wake up, I feel those things like real, and I'm like, oh, why do I feel like this?
Yeah. Your dreams will change. You can go through periods of time where you don't dream at all. 5, 8, 10 years where you just don't dream at all. You can go through periods of time where your dreams transition to be more positive, more upbeat, where in the past, when you had craving, desire, attachment more heavily in your mind, you might have had fear in your dream, or you might have been scared, where as your mind's being transformed, you don't experience those things anymore. So you'll notice that your dreams transform as your mind is transforming. Okay, let me see if I have any questions anywhere else. Looks like Arvind has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Teacher David, the experience of the jhanas, are they experienced during the practice of mindfulness meditation or loving kindness, or is it during both?
If you're in the jhanas, you're going to be experiencing those qualities at all times. It's not just during meditation. But let's just say somebody enters into the first jhana. From that point forward, they're going to be experiencing that. As long as their mind doesn't regress backwards, they don't become complacent. So it's not just in meditation, whether it's breathing mindfulness or loving kindness. It's not only in the meditation, and it's not the meditation that's producing it. You could enter into the jhana at any point in time during your day. And your mind's going to then reside in that jhana. You're going to see the words of the Buddha here in a minute. So it's not the meditation by itself that's producing the jhanas. It's not the meditation where your mind's going into the jhanas. It could go into the jhanas during your meditation, but it can also go into the jhanas initially at any other time during your day as well.
And Teacher David, with regards to the experiencing of the merging of the singleness of mind, the subconscious and the conscious being one, is that a total understanding of the subconscious and everything that lies underneath it? Or is it more of like, oh, I can sense and introspect when certain tendencies are arising and I can arrest them? How does it actually work, the singleness of mind when it comes to the second jhana?
Yeah, so that barrier between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, where the conscious mind doesn't have any awareness of the subconscious mind, basically dissolves and is eliminated, so that now you're fully conscious of the entire mind.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the words of the Buddha on the jhanas so you can see what he actually taught what the jhanas are in terms of the qualities that you're going to be experiencing in each one of these. And then I'm going to break it down for you to help you understand it. So these are the words from the Buddha of what the jhanas are. And you'll find this in multiple places in his teachings, but one of the places where he teaches it is in the Eightfold Path. Yesterday, when we were talking about the Eightfold Path, I said, okay, I'm going to skip over this, but I'm going to read it to you later. So here he's describing, after putting together all the factors of the Eightfold Path, what will you experience having put all those together? And he's describing the jhanas. He says, in what monks is right concentration? Here, a monk distant from sense desires, distant from unwholesome mental states, enters and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy. And with the subsiding of thinking and pondering, by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he enters and resides in the second jhana, which is without thinking and pondering, based in concentration, filled with excitement and joy. And with the fading away of excitement, remaining imperturbable, which means unable to be upset or excited, calm, serene, mindful and clearly aware, he experiences in himself the joy of which the noble ones say, peaceful is he who resides with equanimity and mindfulness. He enters the third jhana, and having given up pleasure and pain, and with the fading away of former gladness and sadness, he enters and resides in the fourth jhana, which is beyond pleasure and pain, and purified by equanimity and mindfulness. This is called right concentration. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down for you because there's a lot of words in here. So what I've done here is I've stripped out all the connecting words just to show you what you're experiencing in each one of these jhanas. So in the first jhana, what you're going to experience is that you've distanced yourself from sensual desires, meaning certain things that you've been holding on to and you've been partaking in terms of your sensual desire. You've now started to distance yourself from that. Let me describe what sensual desire is. What sensual desire is inside your mind, you have a fetter or a taint or a pollution, or the mind wants permanent satisfaction. It wants things to be permanently pleasing. When we talk about craving, desire, attachment, we're talking about sensual desire. The mind is longing and yearning through your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, the body, and then the mind itself, wanting permanently agreeable contact. And when you experience contact through your sense bases that is agreeable to you, you get pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But when you experience contact through these sense bases that is disagreeable to you, that's where you get your painful feelings like the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and others. Okay, so here's a kind of an example of this. If you were walking down the street and you passed by a flower shop and you smelled the odor of the flowers coming out and you were like, oh, wow, that is amazing. Oh, that's such a great smell. Oh, I could just stay here all day. This is so great. Right? Because now you're seeing that odor as pleasurable. And now you're getting all excited by smelling those flowers. But now you walk a few more steps and you smell the sewer. And now you're repulsed by it. It's like, oh, that's horrible. I don't ever want to smell that ever again. Right? Well, all of this stuff is impermanent. The mind is craving permanently agreeable contact. It wants the smell of those flowers to be permanent. And now it gets so excited when it smells something pleasurable and agreeable to you. But now when you smell the sewer, you're repulsed by it. The mind is craving permanence, not realizing that the world is impermanent, that sewer is impermanent. Just keep walking. You don't have to be repulsed by it. And that odor that you're smelling coming out of the flower shop, that's impermanent too. So no need to grab onto it and wanting it to last permanently. So this is an example through the nose. Okay. Let me give you an example through the eyes. Let's just say you're walking down the street and you see a young child holding their parent's hand. And it's like, oh, that's so sweet. Look at that little girl, that little boy holding their mom and dad's hand. Oh, that's so lovely. That's so beautiful. You feel so excited to see that. right? But now you turn the corner and you walk down the street and you see a parent slap their child across the face. Oh, maybe you're angry or frustrated when you see that. That's because your mind has central desire. You want to see things that are pleasurable. And when you see the little child holding their parent's hand, you get excited. But now when you see the child slapped across the face, now you're angry or frustrated or annoyed because you're seeing something that's disagreeable to you. So we're not talking about what's wise or unwise, right? Because in my opinion, it's unwise to hit anybody, especially a child. What we're talking about is what's causing the discontentedness. What's causing it is the central desire, the mind's longing, yearning, and holding on to things. Here's another example. Say you go to a restaurant and they have a certain piece of cake, maybe a really great, delicious piece of chocolate cake. And now when it touches your tongue, you get all these excited feelings. You're like, oh my goodness, this is the best chocolate cake ever. I would like to come back here every day and get a piece of chocolate cake. Oh, it's the best chocolate cake ever. You're telling all your friends about it. You're writing Google reviews and telling how everybody this chocolate cake is the best chocolate cake ever. But now you come back the next day and you say, can I have a piece of chocolate cake, please? And they're like, oh, we're all out of it. We don't have any. And now you're frustrated and you're annoyed because the mind really wants that taste on the tongue. This is coming from the central desire. So when you get into this first jhana, your mind is now distance yourself from these things because you're not going to be able to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments by continuing to eat the chocolate cake over and over and over and over again. If every time you come to the restaurant, you get that piece of chocolate cake and you get so excited, well, when you show up someday and they don't have it, you're going to be annoyed or frustrated. So what you'll start doing when you get into the first stage of this first jhana is you'll start distancing yourself from it. That when you come into this restaurant, you might be like, I don't need that chocolate cake today. I'm going to do without it. You're starting to distance yourself from it so that now you can train your mind to be happy and content and peaceful when you have the chocolate cake, but also when you don't have the chocolate cake, you can be happy during that period of time too. So you start distancing yourself from this. It doesn't mean you're going to always never eat chocolate cake. It just means for a period of time, multiple months, you're going to need to train your mind to distance yourself from this chocolate cake so your mind can let it go and let it go and let it go, where you're not frustrated or agitated or annoyed when you're not getting your chocolate cake. So you'll start noticing that you're distancing yourself from these things, right? Not just things like chocolate cake, but other things too that your mind's having central desire for. You might even notice during this period of time that your interest in sex kind of decreases a little bit, right? And that's not a problem. That's what is just going to happen. You might notice your interest in food. If you're attached to food, you might notice that you're eating less on a day-to-day basis, that you're not eating so much food. You're not gorging on food anymore. You're eating a bit less than you used to. So that's what it means to distance yourself from central desires. The things that your mind's holding on to, you're starting to distance yourself from these things. You've also are going to be distancing yourself from unwholesome mental states like anger and frustration and agitation and annoyance, where before the first jhana, you would just let that anger roll right on into your mind and you didn't even think about it. You were just angry and bitter and harsh with people. But now you're starting to distance yourself from that. You're like, you know what? Not interested in being angry anymore because I see what that does and I'm not interested in that. And you're starting to distance yourself. Things like being judgmental or conceited, you're starting to distance yourself from that, being less and less interested in functioning in that way. Your mind's still experiencing these things, but you're starting to distance yourself from it. Then the Buddha talks about thinking and pondering in the first jhana. This is what I was talking about earlier, that when you were off the path to enlightenment, you didn't have any wisdom of what would be wise or unwise in any given situation. And when something happens, you just do it. Or you just do whatever you're going to do. You don't even really think about it. You just react to whatever's going on in the world. But now, once you start building enough wisdom about the path to enlightenment and the natural law of karma, by the time you get into the first jhana, whenever something happens, you start thinking and pondering, what would be the best way to handle this? I just got this notice in the mail that the government says I owe them $3,000. I don't have $3,000. Maybe I'll wait a few days, think about it, maybe I'll give them a call, maybe I'll write them a letter. You kind of think and ponder about things like right speech and right action and what would be the best way to handle this, right? Where before you might have grabbed that letter, you might have called them up on the phone. What do you mean I owe you $3,000? Are you crazy? You might have been yelling and hollering, where now it's like, hold on a second. If I do that, that's going to cause harm and I'm going to experience some unwholesome results here. And that's not what I'm interested in. So you start thinking and pondering about how to handle things. Maybe in the past, your brothers or sisters would send you an email or leave you a message and you would just react right away in a hostile and bitter way where you're like, what's the best thing to do here? Let me think about this. How should I handle this situation? So as you're doing this thinking and pondering, that's what's helping you build your wisdom about what would be wise or unwise. Because the Buddha is teaching you these things, but you also need to cultivate wisdom yourself too. He's not giving you all the answers. You need to cultivate wisdom in each situation. What would be the best way to handle it? Then he talks about being filled with excitement and joy. Whenever you see him talking about excitement, he's talking about conditional pleasant feelings. So that in the jhanas, there can be this bliss. Sometimes people call it that. They call it the ultimate bliss, that you experience these conditional excitement, right, based on some condition. But then whenever he's using the word joy, this is unconditioned happiness or unconditioned joy, where there doesn't need to be any condition met in order for the mind to experience this particular joy or happiness. And that's where you're headed towards. So you're still experiencing this conditional happiness, this conditional excitement in the first jhana, but you're starting to get these glimpses of this unconditioned joy, where you can just be sitting somewhere and be like, the world is just so wonderful. This is really joyful. Like just, you can just have this unconditioned joy. Like, wow, it's really wonderful to be sitting here, right? You're just doing nothing. You're just sitting there, just being joyful, right? So you're going to start seeing this kind of peer through the mind a bit more. So you're still having this excitement in the mind, but you're starting to notice more of this joy coming through. Now, as your mind's moving, continuing to practice the Eightfold Path, and you're starting to focus a little bit on the 10 fetters, your mind's going to move into the second jhana. These enhanced qualities are going to start shining through, where there's a subsiding of the thinking and pondering. Because you've hung out here for so many months and maybe even a year or so, who knows, that you've done so much thinking and pondering, you've got so much wisdom on board that the thinking and pondering is kind of subsiding, because you already know how to handle the situation, because you've handled it many times and you've already cultivated the wisdom. You don't have to think and ponder so much. So that thinking and pondering starts to subside because you've already got a lot of wisdom on board. Then there's this inner tranquility and oneness of mind with concentration and singleness of mind. The inner tranquility is the calmness and the peacefulness starting to come into the mind. And that oneness of mind is that unification of the mind, or where the subconscious and the conscious mind is now one, where that barrier between the conscious and subconscious mind has been dissolved, and you now can see the entire mind. So you're no longer going to be blurting things out without thinking about them, because you have full awareness of the entire mind. And this is where the mind becomes very introspective and inward looking, right? This is where people refer to it as the opening of the third eye, or the divine eye. And you're going to notice more concentration, more focused, where you can stay focused long term. And then by the time you get out of this second jhana, the thinking and pondering, not only has it subsided, but now you don't really have to do much thinking and pondering at all, because you know the teachings very well and you can just do it because your wisdom is on board. And then the mind is still filled with excitement and joy. You're still experiencing conditional, pleasant feelings, but more and more of that joy is starting to shine through, the unconditioned joy. Then as it moves into the third jhana, the mind is going to start noticing this fading away of excitement. Remember, this is a conditional excitement. This is that your mind can only be excited if these things are occurring, right? Sometimes people are like, hold on a second, I'm getting rid of excitement on the path to enlightenment. That's what I live for, is the excitement. Well, you need to be able to see the conditionality of excitement is basically undesirable, because you only can experience excitement when these particular things are occurring. If my boss does this, if my mom does this, if the weather is this, if I get a new car, if this happens and this happens, then I'll be excited. But if those things aren't happening, I'm sad and frustrated. So that conditionality of the excitement starts to fade away here. that the mind is no longer having those conditional experiences, that the mind's starting to come into more and more of this unconditioned happiness, where your mind's just always happy. It's always cheerful. It's always radiant. That window starts to open up more and more and more, where you're starting to experience more and more elongated periods of time with this unconditioned joy, this unconditioned happiness. You're going to get to the point where the mind is imperturbable, where you're unable to be upset or excited. So essentially what's happening is, in the unenlightened state, when you're off the path to enlightenment, you'll experience these extreme highs and these extreme lows, right? Where by the time you're moving into the jhanas and you're in this third jhana, that has shrunk down, where you're not so high and you're not so low anymore. You're still experiencing conditional excitement, and in some cases you might be frustrated or annoyed, but you're not going extreme high, extremely upset, right? You're just kind of going up a little bit and down a little bit, up a little bit, down a little bit. So your mind's still discontent, but it's not experiencing the big shifts in terms of high levels of excitement and low levels of sadness. That's what this imperturbable is, that it's kind of come into the middle a bit more, where there's more calmness and serenity in the mind. And then the mind's going to start experiencing more and more mindfulness and being clearly aware. Mindfulness is awareness of mind. Because up here in the second jhana, you've experienced oneness of mind or unification of the mind. So by the time you get into the third jhana, this mindfulness or awareness of mind becomes more and more all-encompassing, where you're fully aware of what goes on in the mind. And this is where somebody can be very discontent when they start seeing what's really going on in their mind. It's like, whoa, I had no idea all those thoughts and all that stuff was in there, right? So you start becoming more clearly aware of your mind. And now that unconditioned joy becomes more and more profound. That cheerfulness, that bright, radiant, uplifted disposition starts to become more profound for elongated periods of time. Then there's this residing in the equanimity and mindfulness. The equanimity is the calmness and composure, evenness of temper, especially in difficult situations. And then there's this mindfulness, this awareness of mind. Then there's the fourth jhana, where the mind is given up pleasure and pain. What that means is that by the time you've gotten to the fourth jhana, you see the danger in allowing the mind to experience conditioned pleasant feelings and conditioned painful feelings. You've seen the danger in that, and you're like, you know what? I'm done with all of that. Your mind still is experiencing pleasure and pain, conditional feelings at this point, but you're like, you know what? I've seen the truth here. If I keep allowing my mind to get those pleasant feelings, I'm just going to end up in the painful ones. So if you allow your mind to get so excited when you get a brand new job, 5 years later, when the company goes out of business and you get fired and you can't work there anymore, you'll be angry and frustrated that you can't work there anymore. Or if you get so excited when your boss gives you a $20,000 raise, when you guys go through downsizing and they need to lay you off, you'll be angry or frustrated. Or if you get so excited when you get that brand new pair of shoes, when they get damaged, you'll get frustrated and agitated. This is the up and down of the mind, right? So you've seen the truth about that, and you're like, you know what? I'm done with all of this. Your mind still can't do it yet, but you've at least consciously decided, I'm done with all this pleasure and pain. That's what it means by giving up pleasure and pain. The fading away of the former gladness and sadness, this is the mind coming a bit more to the middle. Where the third jhana, of course, your mind's come to the middle, but now it's come even more to the middle, where there's been this fading away of this up and this down, okay? And then this is where the Buddha says that the mind's beyond pleasure and pain. You're beyond the conditionality of these feelings, that the mind is moving more and more into equanimity, where it's calm and composed, and then there's this mindfulness or this awareness of mind, which are now fully developed. You fully have awareness of your entire mind, and you're completely composed and calm with this equanimity. Okay, so you guys have any questions on any of these? Yep. You guys are welcome to ask whatever you like.
I think something, and I kind of want to know if other people struggle with it and how they get through it. It almost feels wrong not to get like angry or excited at certain things. Like, for example, the example you gave of like the child being hit, you know, like that's something that I would get angry at in the state that I'm in now. And thinking about not getting angry at it feels wrong. Like I struggle with the idea of that. So how can I guess, get past that?
Sure. Typically what the mind thinks in the unenlightened state and with the lack of wisdom is that the anger is coming from your care or your love, where it's actually not coming from that. It's coming from the attachment. It's coming from the craving. So by not getting angry, someone might think, well, oh, I must not care, or I must not love this person. So you need to be able to see that the anger isn't coming from the care and the love. It's actually coming from the craving, desire, attachment, wanting every being to be a certain way. So that way you can learn how to maintain your care, you can maintain your love, you can maintain your concern, but you don't get angry or upset. Because that anger and upset feelings, they don't actually help anything. It's not actually improving anything, but you need to be able to see that truth for yourself.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was thinking about, you mentioned this yesterday and also talked about the idea of, in the third jhana, of remaining imperturbable. It's not a word I use every day. Unable to be upset or excited. And I thought to myself, before, say, taking your chocolate cake example, you know, if someone's really looking forward to that chocolate cake and you get it and you really enjoy it, and it tastes delicious, all of that. That's a nice feeling, obviously. But then again, I thought, another part, but if we don't get excited or upset, that's almost like muting our senses in a sense. But then I thought about it further and thought, well, if you can still enjoy that chocolate cake, but not get so excited or not get so upset if it's not there, it's kind of a nicer way to live life. It's a less stressful way to live life, right? Because if you can still enjoy that chocolate cake and enjoy all the sensations of it, but rather than getting so excited about it, and you enjoy it if you're so excited, but then, as you said, there's that disappointment, right? If it's not there, or if it's not as good, if you have it a second time, it doesn't taste as good, something like that. So,
yeah, this is what the mind needs to learn how to do that it doesn't know how to do in the unenlightened state. For an unenlightened being with craving, desire, attachment, it can only enjoy something if it's getting conditioned pleasant feelings. Right? So if it has a craving and it gets what it wants, it's getting those pleasant feelings, and now I'm enjoying it, right? But what the mind needs to learn how to do is the mind needs to learn how to do things from the middle way, where I can eat this chocolate cake and wow, it tastes great, and I can enjoy it without a conditioned pleasant feeling. And this is what the mind doesn't know how to do, and you need to experience that enough times to be able to see how the mind can do that, and it's a much better experience than what you're experiencing before. Because as you said, with the craving, desire, attachment, you can only enjoy if you're getting the pleasant feelings, but then when they don't have your chocolate cake, you're frustrated, agitated, or annoyed. Where what you can get to is where, hey, when they have the chocolate cake, I'll order it, and wow, it tastes really great. I enjoyed having that cake. But when I come back tomorrow and they don't have it, hey, I'm fine too. That's okay. You know, there's no discontentedness whatsoever. That's what you would ultimately like to get to. And the mind needs to be trained to do that in each one of these situations. So what you're doing is you're bringing your practice up to the Eightfold Path, and then you're living your life like that for an elongated period of time. And you're going to start noticing these differences, like one that she was just mentioning. Like sometimes students have called me, they're like, David, I just went to my grandmother's funeral and I was the only one not crying. And people thought that I didn't love my grandmother because I wasn't crying. And people were upset with me that I wasn't crying. How would you deal with this? And I was like, oh, okay. So they have a craving for you to cry. They're wanting you to cry. They're associating you crying with you loving grandma, and now they're blaming you and judging you as if you didn't love grandma. And I asked them, did you love grandma? And they're like, absolutely, I love grandma. I just wasn't attached to her, so I didn't cry. I wasn't sorrowful. So you need to live your life like this for an elongated period of time and start having these experiences where you can see, like, no, I loved grandma. I'm just not sad at her funeral because I understand she's impermanent. She was born, so she had to die, and it doesn't mean that I have to be upset just because she died. Or I can walk down the street and see that parent slap the child. And I can disagree with that, and I would never slap my child. But the fact that that parent did that to their child, I can't control that parent. I can't stop that parent from doing something. That parent did that based on their own lack of wisdom and their own craving. And I can't be with that child for the rest of their life and protect them fully. And there's no reason for me to get upset and angry about this because it's not helping the situation. So you start living your life like that for an elongated period of time, and you start having these different experiences, and now you process it differently through the Eightfold Path as opposed to the way we did before. And now it is in a more enjoyable way of living life. That's what the Buddha said, is like, I discovered this better way of life, but the mind does need to get used to it because it feels odd. If you've been used to showing up to funerals crying and being sorrowful and everyone else is crying and sorrowful, now when you're showing up to funerals and you're not sorrowful, it can feel odd and you can feel weird. But your mind will get more and more used to it. And you're like, you know what? That was actually better because after the funeral, now I can go out and have fun and do everything else. I don't have to feel miserable and sit around in the house for 3 months missing grandma and feeling sorrowful. I can just go out and continue to live my life and have a great time. And that doesn't mean I love grandma less. It just means that I wasn't attached to her. So it takes time to adjust to this and experience this. It's almost like when you get a new pair of shoes, you need to kind of like wear those new pair of shoes for a period of time so they feel comfortable on your feet. Have you ever had a pair of shoes like that? Yeah, it takes you like a few weeks or a few months before those shoes feel good. At first, they feel really uncomfortable. But then after you wear them for a few weeks or a few months, it's like, oh my gosh, these are the best shoes I've ever had. They're so comfortable. It's the same thing as you're getting a new mind, and you got to kind of sit with it for a while. You got to work with it for a while so you can feel comfortable with this new mind that the mind is now moving into.
So we talk a lot about attachment. Is that, in a sense, the opposite of an attachment would be a detachment? So we can almost have that little bit of distance. And we could apply it, I guess, like with what's happening in the world. If we look at the news and terrible things happening, we can look at that and think, wow, this is terrible, this is awful. But rather than getting into it so much and feeling really, we can feel sad, but with a sense of, I don't know, distance. I'm not sure if that's the right word to use.
By the time you get to enlightenment, you're not going to feel any sadness at all. And when we talk about detachment, I don't really use that word much, but other people do. Sometimes people feel like, oh, you're just detached, meaning you don't care. And you're kind of like indifferent about what's going on. That's not what an enlightened being is experiencing. You care, you have concern, but you just realize that in certain situations you can't influence the outcome of that thing. So why do I need to get upset and angry about that? It doesn't make sense for me, right? So an enlightened being doesn't experience any anger, any sadness, any frustration about anything whatsoever. But this word detach is kind of like not really helping people to understand, because it sounds like you're unconcerned about things. So being detached means that you're just not attaching your feelings to what is or isn't happening, right? So if I got a phone call right now that my wife was in a terrible car accident, she was at the hospital, I wouldn't be upset. If she died today, I wouldn't be upset. I wouldn't be frustrated. I'd be like, okay, well, she's passed away. What do we need to do next? Right? Let's handle this situation. This is unfortunate, but let's handle this situation and make sure that the right things occur. But being angry or upset about it wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't make anything better. So being detached doesn't mean you don't care or you're indifferent. It just means that your feelings aren't attached to what is or isn't happening. Now, sometimes people don't understand this when I say it, but I'll say it and see if you guys would like to ask questions about it. An enlightened being actually doesn't experience any feelings at all. A feeling arises, it changes, and it fades away. An enlightened being is experiencing wholesome mental qualities that are just always in the mind. You're always cheerful, you're always bright, you're always radiant, your mind is always uplifted, but your mind's not going up and down and up and down. And some people feel like, oh, well, if that's the case, aren't you just numb? And the answer is no. Your mind is just bright and cheerful and uplifted, but your mind's not going up and down and up and down. And I don't know if you guys can understand that or not. It's very different than the way you live your life right now. It's very different. Yeah. Yeah. Your mind is just always cheerful, always bright, always uplifted. It doesn't matter what's happening. Like a nuclear bomb could go off, and it's not that you don't care. It's not that you're disinterested in it. It just means that you're not going to attach your feelings to whether that thing is occurring or not. And other people don't always understand this because they're expecting you to show up to grandma's funeral and cry. And they're associating that crying, that sorrowfulness, with love. But they don't understand that that's not what's causing that. It's attachment that's causing that sorrowfulness. It's their lack of wisdom that's making them come to that conclusion.
Are you saying that so to take the example of grandma's funeral, you would have the same amount of love for her as you would for somebody you don't know on the street? So your level of love is the same for everybody. So it's not like you really loved grandma more. You know, you love her the same as every person, every animal on the planet.
Exactly. And when you come to understand what love is, it's a genuine interest in seeing a being be well. And one of the problems is that we use this word in a way that it's not actually intended to be used. Someone might say, I love chocolate. You don't love chocolate. You don't have a genuine interest in seeing chocolate be well, right? Because chocolate's not a living being. You can only love a living being. That's all you can do. You can only love a living being. You can't love chocolate. You might be attached to chocolate. You might have a craving for chocolate. You might really want a chocolate very, very much, but you don't love it, right? So the problem is with the lack of wisdom in the unenlightened state, people talk in ways that is actually not true reality because they don't understand what love is. So they're using the word love in certain things. So like if you hear a love song, we were talking about this yesterday. If you hear a love song, right, they're actually not talking about love at all. They're talking about craving, desire, attachment. When you hear these songs, they're like, I can't live without you. I can't go on without you. Please come back to me. I'm falling apart and my life is in shambles unless I'm with you. That's attachment. That's not love. So this is the problem, is people are listening to all this kind of stuff and your mind gets conditioned to think that that's love, that I've fallen apart because I love you so much. No, you fell apart because you're attached to this person. And then when they left you, you were craving permanence. And now you can't go on. My life can't go on without you. Really? That's attachment. That's not love. So the more you understand what love is and you understand what attachment is, you'll start hearing music and you're like, they're not talking about love at all. They're talking about craving, desire, attachment. Yeah. You guys have more questions? I saw you had a mic.
So I've noticed that you always mention the word wisdom instead of intelligence. So I'm just wondering what kind of difference between intelligence and wisdom do you think? And another question is that...
Let me answer one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah. So wisdom is something that you've independently verified, right? Something that isn't, that if you're intelligent about something, you might have read a newspaper article or a magazine or a book or something like that. And it's like, you know the facts, you know the information that is being presented to you. But when you have wisdom, you've learned it, you've reflected on it to independently verify it, and you've practiced it. And nobody can convince you otherwise about that. So the wisdom of the Four Noble Truths, when you have the wisdom of the Four Noble Truths, nobody can ever convince you that somebody else is causing you to be angry. You will know with 100% certainty that any anger is being caused by your own mind with craving, desire, attachment. So somebody can intellectually know the Four Noble Truths, but they don't have the wisdom of it yet because they haven't reflected on it to independently verify it, and they haven't practiced it to see the truth for themselves with 100% certainty. This intellect can change based on the wind blowing, right? But wisdom You know it with 100% certainty. Nobody can ever convince you otherwise because you've independently verified it.
So another question is that you said that if you gain jhanas or enlightenment, you will be able to see the true reality. And I remember that before you also mentioned about the impermanence of self, which is the non-existence of self, the delusion of self. So that reminds me of the Plato's cave metaphor, which is sort of the external world is a delusion. So I'm just like wondering, in Buddhism, which exactly is a delusion? Is it the self or the external world? So like everything is a delusion?
Sure. So it's not until the mind's enlightened that you can see true reality 100%. Until the mind gets to enlightenment, there's still a certain amount of ignorance or a knowing of true reality. So even in the third stage of enlightenment, the mind still hasn't seen true reality 100%. So the jhanas, you're not seeing true reality 100%. You're starting to see it. That's the glimpses and the light bulbs flickering. But once the mind is enlightened, that's when you can see true reality 100%. When we talk about delusion, that's another word for ignorance or unknowing of true reality or lack of wisdom or confusion or misunderstanding or misperception that the mind has. Some people refer to it as delusion. So the delusion or the lack of wisdom is within one's own mind, that the mind lacks wisdom about the natural laws. That's the delusion that the mind has. One of the delusions is other people are making you angry. That's a delusion, right? So the delusion or the ignorance or the confusion, it's all within someone's own mind. If anybody ever tells you that the world is an illusion or it is a delusion, that's not true. What you can ask that person is you can say, when you walk across the street, do you look both ways? And they're going to say yes. Well, you say, well, if the world is an illusion, then why do you look both ways? Oh, because I don't want to get hit by a car. Oh, so the world's not an illusion. That is a real thing that is occurring. There is a truck coming down the street. So that's not the delusion. That's not the illusion. It is true reality that a truck is coming down the street. And if this being steps in front of it, it's going to get hit and then you're going to die, right? So the world is not an illusion. The world itself is not a delusion. The delusion is inside one's own mind, where the mind is confused about the world. And now when you understand the natural laws, you're no longer confused. You can see true reality. The mind is now wise to all these natural laws. And now you will function in a wise way that produces wholesome results for you. Mm-hmm. You have a question?
Let's say on the street and I see somebody being cruel to an animal or a child, and then I think, okay, that person doesn't have the wisdom, has some ignorance, and not everybody's gonna treat animals and children the right way, but I want to intervene somehow.
I want to what?
Intervene.
Intervene. Okay.
And stop somehow. What would be the best way, or I should not do anything and let this is part of the world.
So the first thing you need to do is not think about it as they're not treating that person the right way. That's the mind's conceit, thinking my way is the right way and everyone else's way is the wrong way. So you got to get rid of that type of thinking. Instead, they're not treating that person the same way that I would treat that person. Right? Because that's just a difference. That's just impermanence. But when we use the word right, that's assuming that my way is the right way and everyone else's way is the wrong way. And that's where the conceit comes in. So you'd like to get rid of that, the first part. Now, when somebody does something, this actually happened to me when I was traveling 3 years ago. I was in a country that I don't speak the language, completely different culture. I was standing in a market. We're in a circle and I heard somebody whack and they slapped You could hear, it was like whack. And I turned and I looked and I saw a father like looking at his kid with like this really angry look on his face. And you could tell that he most likely just slapped the child, right? So I was with these other people and I turned to my wife and the other people and I said, did what happened that I think happened, did that just happen? And they're like, well, what do you think happened? And I was like, did that father just slap his child across the face? And they said, yep, that's exactly what just happened, right? And at that point, I thought about it for a second. I was like, that's really unfortunate, right? I wouldn't have slapped my son. I've never even raised my hand at my son. But here I am in a foreign country. I don't speak the language. I can't be with this child permanently. And even if I went and spoke to the father and said something to him, what is that going to do? That's just me butting into their life with conceit and thinking my way is the right way. And I now need to teach this dad to not do this to his son. So I just looked to see if he was going to hit him again, and he only hit him one time, right? So in this situation, I chose to do nothing, right? Because the variables were such that I'm not going to be able to influence this gentleman. I don't even speak his language. I can't be with his son permanently. I can't fix this situation. This is coming from this man's anger and his craving and his lack of wisdom. But that's not to say that's the wise thing to do in every situation, right? So if I was in that same situation and that man was continually beating his son in that market, I probably would have tried to step in and do something. I'm not sure, because you have to look around at the other situations, right? Are there people standing around with knives and guns and, things like this? Is it better to go get the police and let them handle the situation? But once you step in, now you're going to experience karma, because you're having contact in this situation. So you need to do it wisely of what am I going to do here? In most situations, it's best not to step in, but there are some situations where you might choose to step in. And that's going to be a case-by-case basis, because the variables are going to be different in each situation. And you need to be able to look at those variables and decide what would be wise or unwise in any given situation. Because the Buddha is not giving you a permanent answer. If this happens, always do this, because that would be permanence. So you need to be able to have this higher consciousness where you think through what are the variables here and what would be the wisest way to handle the situation. So I wouldn't be able to tell you whether to step in or not, because each situation is different. Okay. All right. So we should probably take a little break. Let me see for a second. Let's take a break. We usually take a break at around 10:30, 11 o'clock. So it's 10:20. Let's take a 20-minute break. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. It's 11:20. Yeah, 11:22. So let's take a 20-minute break, and let's just say we get back at 11:45. That'll kind of give us a 20-minute break. So enjoy your break, and I'll see you at 11:45, and we'll finish up this talk. Okay? Thank you guys for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn. Okay, so we're going to pick this up where we left off. I was describing to you all the four different jhanas and the different qualities that you experience in these different jhanas. But now I'm going to move into sharing with you some words of the Buddha on the jhanas, because what I shared with you before is the Buddha describing the jhanas and what they are and those enhanced qualities. But there's places in the teachings of the Buddha where he's describing other aspects of these jhanas, not necessarily the enhanced qualities, but just kind of other aspects of them. So for like example, this one right here, he's describing that when you enter into the jhanas, that you have blindfolded Mara, the evil one. This is a being that is a formless being. Some of you guys probably heard of this being and refer to it as the devil or Satan or Lucifer or something like this. This is an actual real being that is interested in causing calamity in the world, and it influences beings to do unwise things. This being can't choose to do anything for you, but just like you were hanging out with a friend and a friend would be like, hey, let's go over here and snort some cocaine. And you're like, that's not so wise. Have fun. Enjoy yourself, right? Like maybe you're thinking in your mind like, that's not so wise. Go have a good time if that's what you're planning to do, right? Or I'm not interested in that, or whatever it is that you might say to them, right? So you can be influenced by your friends, but they can't make choices for you. And it's the same thing like this being Mara. This being is a real, actual being. It's a formless being that can influence you, but it can't make decisions for you. And what the Buddha says is that by the time you get to the jhanas, that you've blindfolded this being, meaning that this being will no longer be interested in influencing you because it knows that you have too much wisdom at that point that it's unable to influence you. So it doesn't even try. So this is a beneficial aspect of getting to the jhanas, is that this being Mara will no longer attempt to influence you. Here, the Buddha talks about being secure from danger. Again, very similar in that he's talking about how this being Mara is unable to influence you. He talks about moving into the jhanas, that there's this higher mind, that now that you're experiencing the jhanas, that you've moved to this higher mind where there's more peacefulness and more joy in that higher mind. Here he talks about how getting to the jhanas, it leans and slopes and inclines towards the first stage, or in actually all the other stages of enlightenment and enlightenment itself. So here he's saying that getting to the jhanas, it slants, slopes, and inclines towards enlightenment itself. That's what I was sharing with you, that in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment or enlightenment itself, you would need to actually experience the jhanas. Those enhanced qualities of mind would be needed in order for the mind to be able to experience those. Then he talks about inconceivable matters. There's these matters that he talks about that are inconceivable for someone to basically understand this without having experienced it. He talks about the experiences that a Buddha has. They are inconceivable to the average person, that you would need to be a Buddha to actually understand the experiences that a Buddha has. So they're inconceivable. He talks about other things that are inconceivable by the average person. So he's saying that in terms of getting to the jhanas and what you're experiencing when you're in the jhanas, he basically says that without being in the jhanas, you can't fully understand what the jhanas are without having been in them. So it's an inconceivable matter to be able to understand what the jhanas are without having experienced them. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't attempt to understand them. You can attempt to understand them, but you're not going to fully understand them until you're experiencing them. It's kind of like if you've never had chocolate ice cream before, and I sat here and tried to explain to you what chocolate ice cream tastes like. You can get kind of like a general idea of what chocolate ice cream tastes like, but you're not going to fully understand it until you taste it yourself. So it's the same kind of thing with the jhanas. He says that they're inconceivable matter, meaning that you wouldn't be able to actually know with 100% certainty what the jhanas are and what you're experiencing until you're actually experiencing them yourself. So no matter how much we talk about the jhanas, just understand you're not going to understand them 100% through just talking about them. You need to actually experience them. He also talks about in order to get to the jhanas, an individual needs to be working to eliminate what's called the 5 hindrances. There's 5 hindrances, which I'm going to teach you as part of this course, which are going to obstruct you from progress on the path to enlightenment. These are things like sensual desire, ill will, doubt, complacency, things of this nature, restlessness and worry. These are all things that are going to hinder you from being able to experience enlightenment. So in order to get to the jhanas and beyond, you need to be ensuring that you're eliminating the 5 hindrances. So that's why I'm going to be teaching it to you as part of this course. Then he talks about how meditation, this breathing mindfulness meditation, leads towards the jhanas, that's what's going to actually help you to get to the jhanas, is breathing mindfulness meditation. But also he talks about the precepts, he talks about the Eightfold Path, he talks about all of these things are going to help you to get to the jhanas. But he also describes how breathing mindfulness meditation leads to the jhanas. He also talks about in order to get to the jhanas, you would need to eliminate selfishness. You need to eliminate selfishness from the mind, because if there's selfishness in the mind, it means that the mind's holding on and clinging and craving. And he talks about these specific things. He says selfishness in regards to dwellings. Like if you weren't interested in sharing your house with other people and you despise having anybody to come sleep in your own home, he's saying an individual who's making their way through the jhanas would have let go of that craving, desire, attachment. Maybe you have a certain craving for your house to look a certain way and be a certain way, and you're disinterested in sharing it with other people. He says that this person would have already been past that by the time they get to the jhanas. Selfishness in regards to families, meaning you would be willing to share with your family, that you'd be willing to share with them. Selfishness in regard to material possessions, that you'd be willing to share any kind of material possessions that you have, like maybe your computer or your mobile phone. Someone's like, hey, can I borrow your mobile phone? Sure, here you go, you can use it, right? But if you're selfish regarding material possessions, you wouldn't be willing to let somebody share or borrow that. Selfishness in regards to praise, meaning you'd be willing to praise other people. You're not interested in doing that excessively, where you're excessively praising people, because then their ego is going to arise. But you would be willing to say, hey, you did a really good job with that, Barbara. Can I work with you on the next project, right? Or something like this. You'd be willing to praise people for the good things that they're doing, the wise things that they're doing. And then he talks about an individual who's gotten into the jhanas. They won't have selfishness with regards to the teachings. Having selfishness in regards to the teachings means that you hold them to yourself and you're unwilling to share them with other people. So like if you had a book and someone was like, hey, you're studying those Buddhist teachings, can I read your book? You'd be like, yeah, sure, here you go. You'd be willing to share the teachings. Or say you're sitting in an airport and someone's like, hey, I heard that you practice the teachings of the Buddha. How does he teach meditation? You'd be willing to share with them in that situation. You wouldn't just be holding it to yourself. And the reason why is because you understand the quality of the jhanas, you understand the quality of your mind, and you would be interested in seeing other people experience that too. So when you're in the jhanas, you'd be willing to share with other people what it took for you to get to the jhanas if they ask you for it. So that's what he's saying, that you wouldn't be selfish in regards to the teachings. These are all in the book series that I share, these volumes 2 through 13. You'll see all of these different teachings in there. With the full description. This is essentially the same thing, but I'm just including in here the references here so you can see the reference. This takes you back to the original source teachings of the Buddha in the Pali Canon. So this is where the Buddha is actually talking about how these jhanas and this elimination of selfishness leads to enlightenment itself. So you can see that. So basically, when you get to the jhanas, this is the time to start focusing on the 10 fetters. You would like to continue your forward progress into the stages of enlightenment by further developing your life practice. So whatever you've been doing with the Eightfold Path to get you into the jhanas, you would like to keep doing that, but now start focusing on the 10 fetters. So when you start noticing those qualities of the jhanas that I talked about, that's where you would like to start focusing on the 10 fetters. So ensure that your mind isn't getting complacency or conceit when you're in the jhanas. These are two things that can arise when you're in the jhanas. You can become dull and lethargic, disinterested, and unmotivated to be able to make forward progress on the path, because what you're experiencing in the jhanas is quite nice. It's kind of like sitting on that soft, cushy couch and you don't want to move beyond it. So you're going to need to be paying attention to any kind of complacency, but then also this conceit. The arrogance, the pride, thinking that you're so great. Oh, these people don't have any concentration. Look how uncalm their mind is. My mind's so calm, right? The mind can become very conceited during this period of time. And the way that you can ensure that complacency and conceit doesn't arise is to realize that you're not done yet. Whatever you're experiencing in the jhanas, that pales in comparison to what you're going to be experiencing when your mind's in the enlightened mental state. So remind yourself of that there's something even better beyond the jhanas. So you're not done yet. This is where the work really fully begins, because now you've got all the qualities on board that you need. You've got full awareness of your mind. You've got equanimity. You've got mindfulness. The joy is starting to come through. You've got more wisdom now than you've ever had before at any other time in your life. This is where the real work really actually begins, when you get to the jhanas. So don't think about it like it's a finish line and you've crossed the finish line and now it's like, now I can just sit back and do nothing. Instead, it's like, no, this is where the real work actually truly begins. So what I typically do here is just kind of end by sharing with you that this is where the light bulb's flickering. Don't let it go out, right? Because if you become complacent, your mind's going to regress. Keep doing the things that you were doing that led you to the jhanas, so that you don't let this light bulb go out. Stay focused with determination, dedication, and diligence. Continue to practice what got you to the jhanas, which is the Eightfold Path, right? So what I will do here is I typically just kind of pause and see, do you guys have any questions on the Eightfold Path whatsoever? Because this is what's going to get you to the jhanas, and it's important that you know this teaching inside and out, backwards and forwards. Is there anything that you guys have questions about with the Eightfold Path? No questions? Let me see if we have anything online. Okay, I don't see anything online. Okay. Oh, we have a question? Yeah.
You cultivate love and kindness during meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you identified that you're fearful about the future or about something. Can you build in your meditation, I'm not fearful, or some things that you recognize that you need to improve?
That's not what that's for. In order to eliminate your fear, you're going to need to identify the craving that's there and then eliminate that. Just thinking in your mind, may I eliminate fear, isn't going to actually do it. So I'm going to teach you in this course about how to eliminate your fears, because we have a class about that. So you'll learn about how to eliminate your fears there, but it's getting rid of the craving, desire, attachment that's causing it, rather than meditating it away. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
When you spoke about non-selfishness, and I'm wondering,
it's still on. Yeah, it's still on. It's just the frequency.
Oh.
The sound people told me that the police station across the street is using a similar frequency as us.
Oh.
So we have interference from that.
They might,
or maybe we're interfering with them.
You might hear my question. What was it going to say? Oh yeah, thank you. When selfishness, am I right in thinking that you kind of need to read the room in a sense of, you gave the example of, like, if someone wanted to borrow your cell phone, you would let them use it, but it would have to be situation, because if it was somebody here, we're not going to run off with your cell phone. Whereas maybe if it was a very crowded place, lots of people around, would you still let someone use your cell phone because you think, okay, well, this place looks, maybe it's a place that seems a little unsafe or something like that?
Everything that the Buddha is teaching you is built upon discernment. Discernment is wise decision making, right? So you need to be able to always practice wise decision making, because it's never always do it this way, right? It's not like that. So it's not like anybody and everybody that comes up to you and asks you for your cell phone, you would be willing to share it with them, because that would be permanence, right? So you need to be able to use discernment, right? And then this is how you're going to be able to make decisions in the world. But you need to make sure that your judgment, your pollution isn't getting in the way of making a wise decision in certain situations. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is not to allow your craving and clinging. So if you know, like, in situations like this, if someone was like, hey, can I borrow your cell phone? You're like, yeah, here you go, sure. And you feel comfortable using it and you're completely fine with that. But if maybe you were on the street and somebody you completely don't even know, and maybe their face is looking very angry and bitter and harsh and hostile, and they come up to you and say, hey, can I use your cell phone? You might be like, oh, really? You need to use my cell phone? Like, what's going on? What's happening? And they're like, oh, my car down the street is having a problem. Can I use your cell phone? Well, hey, maybe I'll walk down there with your car and see your car, and we can check it out, right? Maybe you would do something like that, perhaps. Maybe not, depending on, maybe it's a dark alley, maybe it's 2:00 in the morning, right? And you wouldn't do those kinds of things. So each individual decision has to be based in discernment, and the variables are so different in each situation. You have to look at it. But essentially, what he's saying is that you wouldn't have craving and clinging to your material possessions, that you would be willing to share them. So if you know in certain environments you share them openly and willingly, you need to look at the situations that you're encountering where you're not sharing it and make sure it's based in discernment, and it's not just that you have craving, desire, attachment. And you'll know that to be true because in vast majority of the situations you do share your material possessions, but in this rare situation you're choosing not to share it. And that's not based in craving, desire, attachment. It's based in discernment. So that's where you need to look at each one of these things individually. You know, the unenlightened mind typically is like, all right, just tell me how to do it. Like, I'll always do it this way or I'll always do it that way. But that's not the way these teachings work, because you're moving to a higher consciousness and trying to figure out what would be wise in any given situation. And the variables are always going to be unique and different. But if you understand, like, generally, you would like to be sharing your material possessions. And now when you are sharing, if you have something very expensive like a mobile phone, you need to use discernment with this, because if you didn't have it, that would cost a significant amount of money for you to get a new one. And now you need to make sure that you do this in a wise way, right? So this is how you can look at your life and look at the totality of what you're experiencing, making sure that you're sharing and you're not having craving, desire, attachment, but at the same time applying discernment or wise decision making. Mm-hmm.
That situation where you're on the street and let's say somebody wants to use your cell phone, and you perceive that situation to be threatening, or you know, you perceive, your instinct tells you maybe this person will run off with my cell phone. Mm. Isn't that wouldn't there be some attachment there, because you don't want that person to run off with your cell phone, because as you said, it's going to be expensive to replace, it's going to be a big hassle, etc. Mm-hmm. So isn't that in itself a form of clinging?
You can't just say that because I'm not interested in allowing this person to use my mobile phone, that there's necessarily a craving, desire, attachment there. It's all what's going on in the mind. You can't see in 100% of the situations when someone else is having craving, desire, attachment. You'll be able to see your own, but you won't necessarily be able to see everybody else's. So, for example, I know that I'm not attached to this cell phone because at one time I had fear. I left it at home by accident. I had fear. My fear came up, and you guys are going to hear when I talk about this, about how to eliminate the fear. I eventually got to a point where one day I accidentally left the phone at home again, and I didn't have any fear anymore. And then one time when I dropped the phone and it broke and it shattered, I wasn't discontent. Whereas if I was attached to the cell phone when it broke, I would be angry or frustrated. So I know that I'm not attached to the cell phone, but I might still, out of wise decision making, choose not to let someone borrow it if I'm in a place where maybe I'm not familiar with, that I don't know people, I don't have any other means of communication, and if this person walks away with my phone, I wouldn't be able to afford to get a new one. So you could choose wisely not to allow someone to use your phone, but there wouldn't be any discontentedness there. You would be able to talk polite and kind and friendly and respectful. You would be able to see in other situations you haven't been discontent when this phone is impermanent. So you can't just say because they won't let me use that phone, they're attached to it. That's not necessarily true. It's what's going on in the mind. Now, if this person was angry and frustrated, like, why do you want to use my cell phone? This is my phone. okay, there's an attachment there for sure, right? But still, it might not be wise to let somebody use it in that situation. So each situation is different, and that's why this practice is your practice. It's not about other people and judging other people, whether they are attached to something or not. It's about you doing the work internally. But so you're not going to be able to see other people's attachments 100% of the time, but you'll see your own when you develop your mindfulness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had a question about meditation, because I think you mentioned that there are 4 kinds, of meditation practices. One being about eliminating self-view. Can you tell us a bit more about that, and maybe at what point of this journey would that be most helpful?
Yeah, I'm going to teach it to you as part of this course. There's a place where I have a class where I'm going to teach you about the meditation to realize non-self. Where you start using it is right here at the Jhānas. When you start getting into the Jhānas, that's why I say you need to pivot your practice. You're going to need to start focusing on the 10 fetters more closely. And that's the point to start using that meditation. Because now it's time to move into the first stage of enlightenment. In order to get into the first stage of enlightenment, you need to eliminate personal existence view. And prior to the Jhānas, your mind's not really prepared to let go 100% of the personal existence view. So it doesn't really make sense to use the meditation prior to that. I mean, it's not going to harm anything. It's not going to hurt you, but it's not going to have the same effect until you're actually in the Jhānas. But I'll teach it as part of the course if you're going to be here, or you could watch the recordings because it's been recorded many times. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have a question regarding with not being selfish about the teachings of the Buddha. What is your, I know it will vary depending on the situation, but what is your general advice when we the teachings? Are you Buddhist now? Can you explain to me what Buddhism is? Or what is meditation? I feel when I'm asked these questions, I feel a bit of resistance about to start talking about it. Sometimes I just share specific example how it works for me and others around me, but I feel uncomfortable most of the times when I'm asked those questions.
Okay, so that's what the Buddha's talking about here, is getting to the point where that's not there. Because that uncomfortableness is coming from the craving. The mind's holding on to something in your mind. So in general, when someone asks about the teachings, it's best to let them keep asking questions and you just giving them the answer to what they're asking for. Because sometimes when you've had such a profound experience, which is what people have with these teachings, is they have a complete transformation in their life and in their mind. When someone asks one little question, they just go on and on and on and on and tell you all kinds of things about everything. And you just kind of overload the person with information. And now they're just like, oh man, I'm sorry I asked that question, right? So what you do is if they ask you a question like, hey, do you practice the teachings of the Buddha? Yeah, I sure do. They work amazingly. Really? What's the teachings like? Oh, well, you need to learn and reflect and practice. There's no belief in the teachings. It's based in wisdom and training the mind. What kind of training of the mind do you do? Oh, well, there's meditation, there's this, you kind of give it little by little, because when they're asking for it, then they're hungry and they're trying to pull the teachings into their life. Whereas if they were like, hey, do you practice the teachings of the Buddha? And you're like, oh yeah, there's the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, and man, it's transformed my mind and my relationships are going so well. And oh my gosh, you just got to get in here. Like, come on, like, let's get in here, right? Like, they're just going to be like, whoa, that's too much. So you'd like to leave space for them to keep asking questions and kind of pulling it out of you. And you need to get to the point where you're willing to share. I don't know, maybe there's some personal existence view there because you live in a Christian country and, you probably grew up in a Christian country. I think Spain is fairly Christian, right? So maybe there's some personal existence view where you don't want to be perceived as one way or another. You need to look at it and see what is the uncomfortableness coming from. This is where you have to look internally and have mindfulness and figure out what's the craving, what's the desire, what's the mind holding on to? Is it just not interested in spending your time sharing with this person, what is it that is holding you back from why is the mind uncomfortable? There's always going to be a craving, but you've got to figure out what are the cravings that are in there. So by looking inward, you'll be able to figure that out. But generally, if you just let them keep asking questions, that's the best way. Okay. So we have a question coming in here on Facebook. It says, when I was dreaming about something, it happened after a week or a month. Can you explain this? I think what you're asking is, you have the recurring dream that's recurring over and over and over again. This is just the mind clinging and holding on to this thing, and it just keeps recurring over and over and over again. So if you train the mind with the Eightfold Path, it'll train the mind to eliminate that clinging, and you won't have that reoccurrence of this occurring over and over and over and over again. Okay. So I don't see any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do here is, it's basically 10 minutes after 12. There's another talk that was planned for the morning, but I'm going to move it to this afternoon when we get back. It's understanding the 4 stages of enlightenment. And there's a little bit of the 10 fetters in there as well. But let me see something real quick before I even say that, even though I've already said it. Actually, you know what? Let me teach this to you now. Let me teach it to you now, because then that means this afternoon we can continue to learn about the 10 fetters, because that's a lot of detail there. So let me just kind of go over this. There's not a whole lot here, because I'm going to teach it to you this afternoon, the 10 fetters. So there's essentially these 4 stages of enlightenment. Once your mind's in the jhanas and you start focusing on the 10 fetters, now your mind's going to start moving through the 4 stages of enlightenment. These 4 stages of enlightenment are personal growth plan to plot your course to eliminate the 10 fetters. The Buddha kind of lays these fetters out in a way that would kind of naturally lend itself to the elimination of these pollutions. What a fetter is it's like a shackle and a chain and a ball that people used to put around your leg when ancient times if you were a prisoner, and it would keep you trapped and confined in a certain area. So when the Buddha discovered these pollutions in the mind, he referred to them as fetters, because it's keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. So this is the reason why discontentedness is occurring. These 10 fetters are the pollutions. These are the causes and conditions that are producing the discontentedness. And when you get rid of them, that's where the mind is purified. It's now unconditioned. So you're experiencing the permanent mental qualities of peace and calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy, because you've eliminated these 10 fetters. So the 4 stages of enlightenment explains the development of the mind and how to focus on piece by piece by piece of how to eliminate these fetters from the mind. So as a practitioner is eliminating the 10 fetters, that's where you'll start experiencing the 4 stages of enlightenment. And that's where you're going to see significant improvements, even more so than the jhanas. You're going to see these big significant improvements in the way the mind's functioning in terms of focus, concentration, memory, clarity of mind, and this discontentedness diminishing over time. So once the mind is in the first stage of enlightenment, it won't regress backwards from there. That's why a lot of people really focus on getting to the first stage of enlightenment, because in the jhanas, your mind can still regress. But once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind won't regress after that. Okay, so what the 4 stages of enlightenment are not is just like the jhanas. It's not something to be boastful. You're not going to call up your mom. You're not going to put it on your Facebook page or anything like that, right? Also, the 4 stages of enlightenment are not something only experienced by ordained practitioners. Sometimes people think that only ordained practitioners can experience enlightenment or the 4 stages of enlightenment. And this isn't actually true. Anybody and everybody can experience the 4 stages of enlightenment. You don't have to be ordained to experience this. They are not something to crave or become obsessed about, because oftentimes when people hear about the 4 stages of enlightenment, they get obsessed about them and they start craving to get to those things. So you need to be able to gradually make your way towards them. So you're going to learn about the 10 fetters this afternoon, where I'm going to go through each one of them, explaining what they are and the symptoms of them, and even some of the solutions as well. But this is where I just kind of show you what they are. These are the 10 fetters, because as your mind is eliminating the 10 fetters, you're going to be moving through these 4 stages of enlightenment. The Buddha referred to them as stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant, because You'll see here in a moment the reason why. So here, when you eliminate the first 3 fetters of personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances, which you're going to learn about this afternoon, you're now in the first stage of enlightenment. This is called a stream enterer. And the reason why you refer to it this way is because just like a log enters the stream and it will eventually get to the ocean, once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time, either in this life or some future life, a maximum of 7 rebirths. So some of you guys might have been stream enterers in your past lives. And now this is an opportunity for you to get back to that and beyond, perhaps, right? So when you get rid of these first 3 fetters, you have now entered the stream that you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. And then, having eliminated the first 3 fetters, when you thin out number 4 and 5, sensual desire and ill will, you'll enter into the second stage of enlightenment, referred to as a once returner. The reason why it's referred to this way is because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will come back into the world one more time and you will get to enlightenment in that next life. Right? So some of you guys might have been once returners in your past life, and now is your opportunity to get to enlightenment. What it means to thin out number 4 and 5, sensual desire and ill will, it means you have significantly reduced it. So if you're noticing a significant reduction in interest in sex, for example, this is an indication that your sensual desire has been greatly thinned. Or if you're noticing that you're not as angry and hostile and bitter as you once were in a prior time in your life, this is the gradual thinning and the greatly thinning of this fetter of ill will. Okay, so this is what an individual will have eliminated, and this is what they've thinned out in order to get to that second stage of enlightenment. When you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness is significantly diminished. It's a mere fraction of what it once was when you were off the path to enlightenment. You're still getting discontent, but it's just a mere fraction of what it once was. And then as you move into the stage of a second stage of enlightenment as a once returner, once again, it's been diminished even more, because as you're eliminating these fetters, there's less and less opportunity for your mind to become discontent because the pollution's becoming less and less. And you'll understand what these are after lunch. The third stage of enlightenment is referred to as a non-returner. This individual has eliminated all the 5 lower fetters. This person is getting discontent about once every 3 months. Maybe once every 6 months. It's very infrequent and it's very insignificant when it occurs. That maybe 30 seconds or a minute, you become discontent, you can cut it off and let it go and move on from there. So it's very infrequent, maybe like once every 3 months, and it's very insignificant when it's occurring. In this stage of enlightenment, your mind can become complacent because you're not really becoming discontent very much. It's like, whatever. Right? But you need to stay diligent when you're in this stage of enlightenment. We call it a non-returner because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will be reborn into the heavenly realm, and then you will attain enlightenment there. And I know that many of you guys haven't independently verified these 5 realms of existence and that there's even such thing as the cycle of rebirth. But as you progress in your journey, you will be able to independently verify this. I have those details in volume 11, chapter 105, where you can independently verify this. There's 17 different criteria that I share to be able to help you independently verify this, right? So here, this is called a non-returner, where today we might just say the third stage of enlightenment. Then the fourth stage of enlightenment during the lifetime of the Buddha is referred to as an arhat. This is someone who's fully purified their mind of all the 10 fetters. Every single one of them have been eliminated. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, they refer to this as an arhat. But you'll hear some people refer to it that way today as well. We would probably just call this person an enlightened being. That's what we refer to. Your mind is actually enlightened when you've gotten to the fourth stage of enlightenment. You fully purified the mind. You're not experiencing any discontentedness at all. It's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, no discontentedness. Not even the slightest little ickiness is in the mind at this point. In this individual, when they die, they're not going to be reborn anywhere. They're not going to be experiencing rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. What happens once you get to enlightenment and die? The Buddha leaves this as an undeclared teaching. He doesn't describe it. He actually says specifically, he says, remember, students, what did I teach? I taught this. and he points to the Four Noble Truths. And he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he gives 10 things that he does not teach. And one of those things is what happens to you once you get to enlightenment and die. But by the time you get to that point, your mind's so peaceful and joyful, it doesn't matter, right? Because if there is something next, it's either going to be as good as what you're currently experiencing or better. And if there isn't anything next, all right, well, so what? Who cares? You're already peaceful in the present moment. So the Buddha specifically left it as an undeclared teaching, in my opinion, very wisely, because let's just say there is something next after enlightenment, and he describes it. And let's just say it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Well, that's one more craving that you need to let go of. You need to eliminate the craving for that thing, right? And this is going to kind of keep you trapped, that as long as you don't eliminate that craving, you can't actually experience it, right? So he intentionally, in my opinion, left it as an undeclared teaching, because that way your mind won't crave it if there is something next. There may or may not be something next, and it doesn't even matter. And one of the other reasons why he left it as an undeclared teaching, in my opinion, very wisely, is because in order to get to enlightenment, you need to be peaceful and joyful in the present moment. If your mind is longing, yearning for this next thing, then you're not enlightened, because you're not content in the present moment. You're longing, yearning for the next thing. So by the time you get to enlightenment, it's the present moment is completely peaceful and completely joyful. You're not longing, yearning for the next thing. So whether there is something next or there isn't something next, the Buddha never taught it. And a Buddha typically will only teach things that they've experienced for themselves, because then they know that it's true with 100% certainty. And a Buddha has gotten to enlightenment, but they haven't died yet, having gotten to enlightenment. So he wouldn't have known maybe what is next, because he never experienced it himself. But there is a possibility for a Buddha to know things without having experienced it. So if the Buddha did know what was next, in my opinion, he wisely left it as undeclared, because it's going to help you to be like, I don't care. Whatever happens next, it doesn't matter. My goal is to get to peace and joy now in the present moment. And that's what you would like to ultimately get to. So these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. I'm going to teach you these fetters, but now you can see the structure of how your mind moves through these 4 stages. This is like a personal growth plan, a personal development plan. And you generally would like to work with them in this particular fashion, in the way that he has it laid out. Because, for example, this one conceit, which is a higher fetter, you wouldn't actually be able to eliminate that until you've eliminated personal existence view. Right? You wouldn't have been able to do that. This one that's restlessness, this is like overactivity of the mind. You wouldn't actually be able to eliminate that without first eliminating sensual desire. You wouldn't be able to eliminate ill will without first eliminating sensual desire, right? So he's put this in a certain plan, because this is the way that you would generally like to work to eliminate them. But you could potentially, let's just say you're down here in the first stage of enlightenment. You could actually eliminate conceit while you're down here in the first stage of enlightenment. It doesn't mean you have to wait until you get to the 3rd stage of enlightenment before you start working on conceit. You can be working on conceit right now. Whenever you see the arrogance and the pride and the judging others and measuring and comparing people, you can choose to cut that off and let it go. You can work on it now, right? You don't have to wait until you get to a certain point to work on these things. It's just that you're incapable of eliminating conceit, for example, until you've already eliminated personal existence view. So that's why he's putting them in a certain order for you. Okay? And then in terms of how you attain the 4 stages of enlightenment, it starts with a well-developed practice of the Eightfold Path. That's why I teach that in every single course, every single program, because it's a core central teaching. You need to develop your wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. That's going to gradually wear away all the fetters in a very general way. Then you're going to need to work on eliminating each individual fetter, which is what I'm going to teach you this afternoon, of what they are and how to eliminate them. Then you're going to need to understand something called dependent origination. This is something that you haven't learned yet. This is something that I teach in the retreat in January and the retreat in August. I also teach it in the Pali Canon English study group. This is a very deep, high-level teaching. It's the highest level teaching of the Buddha. and you need to kind of prepare the mind and learn a bunch of other teachings before you get to that one. But that's something that you need to learn. Then you would need to deeply understand the natural law of gamma, of cause and effect. You would need to know the 5 aggregates. You would need to know the 6 sense bases. You would need to do what's called accomplishment in view. So far, when you learn the Four Noble Truths, you're doing what's called establishing right view. But there's something called accomplishment in view, which I teach as part of the retreat in January. And then there's something called accomplishment in generosity, which once again, I teach in the retreat in January. This is where you're living open-handedly, being joyful and giving and sharing with other people around you. But there's more details here that I teach. And it's in the book series, it's in the retreat. You'll be able to learn it just fine. Then you're going to need to get to a point where you're having association with wholesome persons. By the time someone understands the natural law of gamma, of cause and effect, they're going to understand that who you choose to associate with in day-to-day life is going to impact you. So for example, let's just say I grew up with a friend all throughout my childhood. Maybe we became friends when I was 6 years old, and we've been friends our whole life. But somewhere around the age of 18, this person started selling drugs. And I've known this my whole life, and now we're in our 20s or 30s. And I know this person sells drugs. We just hang out. He never offers it to me, or she never offers it to me, but we just hang out, and I just have been friends with this person ever since I was 6 years old. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to know that this is really unwise. Because if you're walking down the street with this drug dealer, now a rival drug dealer can see that person, start shooting, and now you get killed because of this. So you're going to know that it's unwise to do these kinds of things because of the cause and effect relationship of the natural law of gamma. Whether you choose to do it or not is your choice. But what the Buddha teaches you is that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will be making wise decisions about who to associate with, because you know that those decisions are going to impact you, and you would make wise decisions about who to involve in your life. He also shares that in order to get to the 4 stages of enlightenment, you would need to hear the true teachings. That's why you need the original words of the Buddha. You wouldn't be able to get to any of these stages of enlightenment without hearing the true teachings of the Buddha. You could actually stumble into the jhanas. Somebody can stumble into the jhanas by putting some different teachings together. I see it all the time that people are learning other places and they kind of stumble into the jhanas. But you're not going to stumble into the first stage or second or third or fourth stage of enlightenment. There's a lot of intentional work, a lot of dedication and diligence that's going to go into that. And it needs to happen with the true teachings of the Buddha. You wouldn't be able to get to the stages of enlightenment without some intention behind it in the true teachings of the Buddha. An individual who's getting to the stages of enlightenment will have careful attention to their decision making. They will understand the natural law of gamma close enough that they will pay a very close attention to every decision that they make, realizing that there's going to be some result or some impact because of it. And then they'll also be practicing in accordance with the teachings. They don't just understand them intellectually, but they'll be practicing the teachings. That's how you know that your ignorance is actually fully eradicated. It's not just an intellectual pursuit, it's that you're actually practicing it. So for example, we can know intellectually that it's unwise to use drugs and alcohol. We were taught that all throughout our life. But because of our ignorance and our unknowing of true reality, we might have still done it. Right? So intellectually, we understood drugs and alcohol are unwise, but because of our lack of wisdom, we still did it. Right? So the way that you fully eradicate your ignorance or the unknowing of true reality is you first need the intellectual learning, but then you need to start making decisions wisely based on that wisdom, where someone wouldn't say, for example, use drugs and alcohol. Now your ignorance regarding drugs and alcohol have been completely eliminated because you're completely disinterested in using drugs or alcohol, for example. And then the Buddha talks about this, about someone who's gotten into the first stage of enlightenment and beyond. They would maintain bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both in public and private, towards companions on the path to enlightenment. So one of the things that a person understands by the time they get to the first stage of enlightenment is that you're learning from your teacher, but you're also learning from other people too in the community. Like you might be like, oh, I really like how Simon asked questions so respectfully. Maybe I'll do that. Or, oh, I really like how Joe donates some time with his generosity to take out the trash after class. Maybe I'll start doing that too. So you kind of notice that things with these wholesome people that are around you, you start picking up things that's just like, wow, I'd like to kind of do that too. You'd kind of like to aspire to be a little bit more like that person. You kind of glean certain qualities that this person has that maybe you're struggling with, and you're like, I can learn from that and do that as well, right? So you understand that it's important to have a teacher and it's important to have access to the teachings, but you also need to be part of a community so that you can learn from other people and you see how other people are practicing the teachings. So the Buddha teaches you that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, that you would have acts of loving kindness both in public and private towards your fellow companions on the path to enlightenment, because you understand how important that is in order to help you get to enlightenment, because you're learning from other people just as much as you are from the teacher themselves. So that's why he's teaching you that, because by the time someone gets to that point, they would know that, hey, I can't get to enlightenment by myself. It's not possible. Only a Buddha could get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. You're going to need a teacher, you're going to need other community members to be able to help you along the journey. So that's why the Buddha is saying that you would have nothing but loving kindness, both publicly and privately, towards fellow companions on the path to enlightenment, right? Because you understand the importance of how observing them is going to help you in your practice and developing your practice. All right, so this is some things about the stages of enlightenment. Do you guys have any questions on that? No? Okay, so it must be lunchtime. So it's 12:30. So I'm going to teach you guys the 10 fetters after lunch. Is it possible to have an hour and 15-minute lunch break today? Is anybody attached or craving an hour and a half? Because that's how long we usually go. Nobody's upset? Nobody's craving it. See, we independently verified the second noble truth, right? Okay, so since it's 12:30, if you guys could be back at 1:45, 1:45, that'll give us an hour and 15 minutes to talk about the 10 fetters and helping you understand what they are in more detail. So enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you guys in an hour and 15 minutes. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm.